My parents hid a $5 million trust fund from me while I struggled to make rent, and when the truth came out, they sat there, unable to meet my gaze. I thought my 26th birthday would be like any other, just another year of scraping by, building my life from the ground up in the heart of Chicago. But that night, a simple question from my grandfather shattered everything. It wasn't just about a birthday dinner. It was about a betrayal so deep that it stole millions from my future and decades from my past. My 26th birthday was intended to be a pleasant occasion, commemorating another year of hard-earned independence. Instead, a single simple question from my grandfather shattered my entire world, revealing a grave betrayal that had stolen millions from my future and decades from my history. Before that night, I was Iris, a graphic artist in downtown Chicago who was just trying to make things work. I lived what I believed was a very regular existence, sharing a little rundown 2-bedroom apartment with my beautiful roommate Olivia. Even when we shared the rent, it was prohibitively expensive. But that was simply city living, correct? Our apartment, however, had character, with mismatched furniture we'd discovered over the years and walls covered in paintings I adored. Despite having a rich grandfather, I was really proud of making my own way. My parents, David and Rachel, had a very happy upper-middle-class existence in the suburbs, with a 5-bedroom house, a pool, and 2 costly holidays per year. I imagined they were doing well because my father was a senior at an insurance business, and my mother worked in real estate. They never gave financial assistance, instead emphasizing the importance of working for your goals. Developing character. When I graduated from art school 4 years ago, drowning in nearly $70,000 in student loans, they practically slapped me on the head. While other friends received assistance with down payments or a few months' rent from their parents, I received a copy of Dave Ramsey and another lesson on character development via suffering. I never disliked them for it. Not then, anyway. I was really desperate to prove myself capable, but there were moments when things were so tight that I questioned why they seemed so hesitant to assist, especially when they'd arrive in a brand new luxury automobile or brag about their most recent kitchen overhaul. It didn't quite add up. Grandpa Edward was always an enigma. He'd started from scratch in real estate development and established one of the Midwest's largest property corporations. He was severe, intimidating, and rarely showed up for family events. When he did, everyone walked on eggshells around him. However, for some reason, he always had a soft spot for me. On the rare instances when we did speak, he asked serious questions about my design work and sincerely listened. My cousin Sophia was the only one in our generation who appeared to benefit from the family wealth. She possessed a trust fund that allowed her to live a very luxurious existence. She never worked a day in her life and was constantly uploading images of exotic locales and high-end eateries. And at family gatherings, she'd always find a way to bring up her most recent buying spree or vacation, almost as if she was attempting to underline the gap between us. The week before my birthday had been very difficult. My design firm lost a key client, and I was one of 5 people let go. I began to panic. I only had enough cash to cover about 2 months' rent, and finding a new work in a competitive area seemed impossible. So when my folks called and insisted on taking me out for an expensive birthday dinner, I tried to decline. I proposed something easy, like takeaway from my apartment, but they were adamant. 27 is special, Iris, they explained. It deserves a proper celebration. In retrospect, their insistence makes twisted sense. There had been clues, small things I'd overlooked, such as when I proposed considering returning to school for my master's degree and my father instantly shot it down, stating I already had enough student debt, or how my mother would swiftly shift the subject anytime I addressed my financial difficulties. There were quiet phone conversations that ended the instant I walked into a room, as well as a weird tension whenever Grandpa Edward's name was spoken. A few months ago, I discovered my mother looking at properties in Panama online. When I asked if they were planning a vacation, she slammed her laptop down, claiming she was only daydreaming. My father had also been making strange comments about how we might not see each other as much in the future because they were planning to travel more. Olivia surprised me with a handcrafted card and a small potted plant for my birthday. We'd been friends since college, and she knew better than anyone how hard I'd worked just to get by. As I prepared for dinner that night, she assisted me in putting together an outfit that looked good while remaining within the confines of my restricted wardrobe. I had no clue that in just a few hours, everything I thought I knew about my family would be broken beyond repair, or that the financial difficulties I had been experiencing for years were absolutely needless. As I applied my mascara and put on my only acceptable pair of earrings, I had no idea I was about to discover the most agonizing treachery. My parents chose a restaurant where the menu had no prices. That instantly made me uncomfortable. Crystal chandeliers, spotless white linens, the whole 9 yards. The hostess brought us to a table in the center of the dining room, where my parents had already reserved champagne. I felt extremely out of place in my plain black dress and the heels I had worn to job interviews for the previous 3 years. My mother, on the other hand, was dressed in a designer clothing I'd never seen before, complete with a necklace that most likely cost more than my rent. My father wore an exquisite suit with gold cufflinks that gleamed in the light. The talk felt forced from the start. They asked surface-level queries regarding my job search, but swiftly changed the subject when I indicated genuine concern. Instead, they kept the conversation safe, discussing a movie they had watched and updates on distant relatives I hardly knew. Following our order, they presented me with my gifts: a luxury pocketbook and a scarf. They were stunning but shockingly modest for the restaurant. As I thanked them, my mother started into a typical lecture about financial responsibility and the value of good credit. I was halfway through my entree, nodding along to another of my father's college memories, when the mood in the restaurant abruptly changed. People at nearby tables straightened. Staff became much more attentive. I turned to see what had caused the change and quickly noticed him. Grandpa Edward. He had arrived with his assistant, Claire, a bright woman in her 40s who was never more than a few steps away from him. At 82, Edward remained an imposing figure, tall, straight-backed, with a full head of silver hair. He wore a wonderfully fitted suit that probably cost more than my annual income, and his very presence demanded attention without him saying anything. My parents paused in the middle of the talk, their faces ranging from surprise to nearly fearful. My father rose hurriedly, almost knocking over his water glass. "Edward, this is unexpected," he said, his voice raised above normal. "We didn't think you'd make it." My grandfather absolutely disregarded him. His severe demeanor relaxed as he neared our table. "Happy birthday, Iris," he said, leaning down and kissing my cheek. His fragrance smelled rich, like leather and cedar. 27 years. It's hard to believe how quickly time passes. "Thank you, Grandpa," I said, grateful that he remembered. "It means a lot that you came." He took the empty seat beside me, leaving Claire standing, tablet in hand, ready to take notes. "I wanted to check in on how things are going," he added, looking at my face with intelligence eyes that missed nothing. "Claire tells me the quarterly reports for your investment portfolio look strong. The trust should be performing well in this market." I blinked in confusion. Investment portfolio? Trust. A tiny furrow formed between his brows. "Yes. The trust fund established when you were born. You turned 25 2 years ago, so everything should have been transferred to your control by now." He talked as if this was common knowledge. My folks became suddenly very interested in their plates. My mother's knuckles had turned white around the fork. "I think there might be some confusion," I answered softly, my gaze shifting between my grandfather and parents. "I don't have a trust fund." Edward's expression remained unchanged, but his eyes sharpened. "Of course you do. Your cousins as well, though yours was the largest. $5 million initially, plus growth, managed by your parents until your 20th birthday, when control was to transfer to you." As I tried to understand what he was saying, the restaurant around us faded away. I had no idea there was a $5 million trust fund. That made no sense. "And the apartment in Gold Coast," Edward said, his voice cheerful, but his gaze now riveted on my parents. "Is it comfortable?" I selected that building specifically because of the security and the views of the lake. "What apartment?" I asked, barely above a whisper. The hush that ensued was deafening. My father had turned pale, and my mother appeared ill. Edward's demeanor remained serene, but there was a frightening stillness about him, like the moment before a storm. "You don't know about the apartment?" he asked. It was not a question. "The 2-bedroom corner unit in the lakeside tower purchased 2 years ago as your 20th birthday present." I shook my head carefully, trying to figure out what was going on. Edward turned to my parents with deliberate slowness, his voice sinking to a quiet tone that was more terrifying than if he had yelled. "Then where did the money go?" My father began to talk with a quiver in his voice. "Edward, there's been a misunderstanding. We can explain everything." "I sincerely hope so," my grandfather said, his tone indicating that he didn't feel there was any explanation that would satisfy him. He turned to his assistant. "Claire, please call Martin and have him meet us here right away." "Already done, sir," Claire responded quickly. "He was at a dinner nearby and should arrive within 10 minutes. I've also contacted security at the office to pull all the relevant financial records." The other guests were staring openly, as if the drama at our table was more exciting than their pricey dinners. A waiter stood close, hesitating whether to approach. My mother stretched across the table for my hand, but I backed away, a nasty feeling rising in the pit of my stomach. Iris, sweetheart, this isn't how we wanted to tell you. Tell me what? I asked, my voice rising despite my efforts to remain composed. That I have a trust fund and an apartment I never knew about, or that somehow you kept them from me? My father looked uncomfortably around at the other diners. This isn't the place to discuss family matters. I agree, Edward remarked coldly. Claire, please arrange for a private room. He looked at me, his expression softening slightly. Iris, I promise you will get answers tonight. All of them. As Claire spoke softly to the restaurant manager, I sat startled, trying to connect the previous year's financial struggles with what I had just discovered. Why would my parents withhold this from me? What had they done with the money that was purportedly intended for me? How could I ever trust them again? The restaurant's private dining room featured dark wood paneling and a large table that could seat 12, making our tiny group feel even more isolated. Edward sat at the head of the table, with me on his right. My parents sat across from me, looking as if they wanted to be anywhere else in the world. Claire positioned herself at the door, tablet in hand, face professionally blank. We were soon joined by Martin Thornton, my grandfather's longtime attorney, a balding man with piercing eyes behind wire-rimmed spectacles. He carried a leather briefcase and gently placed it on the table. I took the liberty of bringing the original trust documents, Edward said, as well as the most recent financial statements. Edward nodded. Martin cleared his throat and addressed me directly. Good. Let's start at the beginning for Iris's benefit. When you were born, your grandfather established a trust fund in your name with an initial deposit of $5 million. The terms were straightforward. The trust would be managed by your parents as trustees until your 25th birthday, at which point control would transfer entirely to you. The only stipulations were that the money could be used for your education, health, and general welfare prior to your 25th birthday, with all expenditures documented and approved. I looked at him in bewilderment. And no one thought to tell me about this? Your parents were instructed to inform you about the trust when you turned 18, Martin said, looking at my father and mother. Based on your reaction, I gather that didn't happen. It did not, Edward answered, his voice tense with repressed wrath. Nor apparently did the transfer of assets at 25. He turned to Martin. What is the current value of Iris's trust? Martin removed several documents from his briefcase and set them on the table. According to the most recent statement from 3 months ago, the trust had grown to approximately $8.3 million. This includes the original principal plus investment growth, minus authorized expenditures for college tuition and the purchase of the Gold Coast apartment 2 years ago. $8.3 million. The number looked impossible. While I was working overtime and foregoing meals to pay the rent, millions of dollars belonged to me and were intended to be used for my advantage. I want to see proof of all withdrawals from the trust over the past 5 years, Edward said. Martin. As the attorney presented additional documents, my father finally spoke up. Edward, we can explain. There were investments that didn't perform as expected. The money is just temporarily allocated elsewhere. Allocated where exactly? Edward inquired, his demeanor menacing. My mom jumped in. David, just tell the truth. She looked at Edward, tears in her eyes. There were some financial difficulties after the recession. We had to make some adjustments by stealing from your daughter. Edward's voice was freezing cold. It wasn't stealing, my father insisted weakly. We are her parents. We were looking out for her best interests. I have found my voice. By letting me struggle with student loans and a tiny apartment with a roommate while you lived in a 4-bedroom house with a pool? By watching me stress about making rent while you bought new cars and went on luxury vacations? How exactly was that in my best interest? Claire softly put a glass of water in front of me. I didn't realize I was shaking until I attempted to take it up and almost spilled it. Martin was perusing the financial documents with a rising frown. There appeared to be numerous unauthorized withdrawals beginning approximately 7 years ago. Large sums transferred to personal accounts belonging to David and Rachel. He turned around, his face gloomy. Based on my preliminary review, it appears that all but approximately $150,000 has been diverted from the trust. The room became silent. $5 million was lowered to $150,000. I felt physically unwell. Where's the money now? Edward inquired, his placid demeanor belying the rage in his eyes. My father gazed down at his hands. Some of it went to pay off our mortgage, some for cars, renovations to the house, investments in Rachel's real estate business, vacations, whispered my mom. The house in Florida. Memories flooded my head, terrible in their new context. When I voiced concern about the payments, my parents refused to help with my security deposit for my first apartment after college, telling me that my student loan burden was important character building. My mother proudly displayed her new Mercedes as I rode the bus to work since I couldn't afford vehicle payments. All while they had access to millions of funds intended for me. You let me struggle, I muttered, scarcely rising above a whisper. All those years, all those sleepless nights worrying about money, you watched me work 2 jobs during college, you saw how stressed I was about being laid off last week. My voice grew sterner as I vented my frustration. And you had my money the whole time. You were living off my trust fund while letting me think I was on my own. It wasn't like that, my mother said, tears flowing down her cheeks. We always intended to pay it back. Things just got out of hand. Out of hand? I asked incredulously. You stole nearly $5 million from me. Edward put a steadying hand on my arm. Claire, please call Detective Ramirez. I believe he's still with the Financial Crimes Unit. Edward, no, my father screamed. There's no need to involve the police. This is a family matter. Theft is a criminal matter, Edward said coldly. Particularly at this scale, please. My mother begged. We can solve this. We can sell the house and automobiles to pay it off. Edward glanced at me and said, Iris, this is ultimately your decision. They stole from you. Whether or not to press charges is entirely up to you. I stared across the table at my parents, whom I had always trusted entirely. The astonishment was giving way to a profound, hurting sense of betrayal, which I knew would never fully heal. I need time to think, I said. I can't process all of this right now. Edward nodded. A reasonable request. He turned to Martin. In the meantime, I want all of their assets frozen. Nothing happens without my approval, and I want a full forensic audit of every dime that has left that trust. Already initiated, Claire stated from her position near the door. The team will work through the night if necessary. And the apartment? Martin asked. Have the locks been replaced immediately? New keys will only be given to Iris, Edward directed. My father made a final desperate attempt. Edward, be reasonable. Where should we go? My grandfather confronted him with a cold stare. You've bought a 5-bedroom house with stolen money, enjoy it while you can. The real estate fraud unit will be particularly interested in how a trust fund purchased property was titled in your names. The restaurant manager tentatively knocked on the door, peeking his head inside to see if we needed anything further. The tension in the room appeared to have its own gravitational pull. Just the check, Edward remarked dismissively. We're finished here. As the manager retreated, I looked around the table at these people who were my family, wondering how I had never seen the truth before. My parents, unable to meet my gaze. My grandfather, steady as a rock beside me. Claire and Martin, efficient and professional in the face of this family implosion. Nothing would ever be the same after tonight. The foundations of my life had been exposed as lies, and I had no idea what would remain standing when the dust fell. The car ride home was silent and oppressive. I had denied Edward's invitation to stay at one of his houses, preferring the familiar comfort of my own apartment, no matter how shabby it was. As the cab drove away, I noticed my parents standing transfixed on the sidewalk outside the restaurant, suddenly seeming small and ancient in the glaring streetlight. When I stepped through my apartment door, Olivia saw my face and knew something was dreadfully wrong. She led me to the couch, wrapped a blanket around my shoulders, and patiently waited while I struggled to find words. My parents stole $5 million from me, I finally said, the words sounding absurd even as they left my mouth. I told her everything, the stories spilling out in disjointed pieces, the trust fund I had no idea existed, the apartment that was supposed to be mine, the years of financial struggle that had been entirely unnecessary. As I spoke, the shock gave way to a bone-deep rage I had never felt before. I applied for food stamps last year, I said, my voice breaking. I was eating ramen for dinner 4 nights a week to save money, and they were using my trust fund to remodel their kitchen and buy luxury cars. Olivia held my hand tightly as I cycled through shock, rage and grief. At one point, she made tea. That grew cold on the coffee table. My phone buzzed constantly with texts and calls from my parents, which I ignored. The only message I responded to was from Edward, who confirmed my safety and asked if I needed anything. Claire called the next morning with an update. Edward's legal team was moving quickly, and they had already confirmed that the house in Florida, my parents' primary residence, and both of their vehicles were purchased with money from my trust. A forensic accountant was tracking down every withdrawal and transfer. The preliminary findings indicate that approximately $150,000 remains of the original trust, Claire remarked with ease. Most of the money went to real estate purchases, luxury items, and some high-risk investments that performed poorly. The days that followed were a fog. I took sick leave from my new job search, unable to focus on anything other than the current problem. Edward sent a car every day to take me to appointments with attorneys, financial advisors, and eventually a therapist specializing in family trauma. A week after my birthday, we discovered that my parents had purchased plane tickets to Panama 3 days before my birthday dinner, and they had planned to leave the country immediately after the celebration, apparently realizing that Edward could discover their deception at any time. The only reason they hadn't fled already was that they needed to maintain appearances until after my birthday, which they knew Edward might attend. My father's siblings backed him, claiming that Edward was overreacting to what was just terrible money management, while my mother's side was more divided, with her sister calling me directly to apologize for her sister's actions. My cousin Sophia, who arrived at my apartment unannounced one afternoon, looked uncharacteristically subdued. I always wondered why Uncle David and Aunt Rachel lived so well when Dad's and our trust funds were basically the same size, she admitted, sitting uncomfortably on my worn couch. I guess now we know. Sophia's trust had been properly maintained, but it was much less than mine had been. She had been careful with her money, making it last while flaunting a more humble lifestyle than social media showed. I was always jealous of how close you were with your parents, she confessed. My parents were always honest about the money, but they were never truly there for me emotionally. I believed you had loving parents and were humble about your wealth. I never imagined they would steal from you. That talk marked the start of an unexpected connection with my cousin, a bright spot in the darkness that had consumed my life. Edward's team discovered that only about $150,000 of my original trust remained. The rest had been spent on my parents' lavish lifestyle or lost in bad investments. The house in Florida and their primary residence were both seized, as they had been purchased directly with trust fund money. The cars, the boat my father rarely used, and my mother's extensive jewelry collection, all documented and evaluated for potential recovery. Throughout it all, my parents made desperate attempts to contact me. As the legal consequences became clear, my father called from a hotel room, claiming they had nowhere to go. My mother sent long emails about how everything they did was ultimately for my benefit, though she never managed to explain exactly how their luxury lifestyle had helped me. Eventually, the media became aware of the story, and a small piece about Edward Harrington's family financial dispute was published in a business publication. Although I was not mentioned by name, the article hinted at significant misappropriation of trust fund assets by close family members, so I deleted all of my social media accounts. The worst part was the constant gnawing feeling of guilt that plagued me, despite being the victim. Had I somehow driven my parents to this? Should I have noticed something was wrong? Was I overreacting by allowing Edward's legal team to pursue them so aggressively? The therapist Edward had arranged for me explained that this was a common response for victims of familial betrayal, but understanding the psychology didn't make the feelings go away. After 3 weeks of living in a fog of legal meetings and mental agony, Edward invited me to dinner in his penthouse, which was unexpectedly warm and pleasant despite its evident opulence. He fixed us both drinks and dismissed the staff for the evening to allow us peace. "I want you to know that none of this is your responsibility," he added, gazing directly at me. "Your parents made their own decisions. They deceived not only you, but the faith you had in them." "I keep thinking I should have known," I confessed. "There were signs," Edward mentioned. "You had no reason to suspect your own parents of stealing from you. Especially when you didn't even know the money existed." That night, Edward showed me images I had never seen before. My grandmother, who died when I was too young to remember her. Edward as a young man working on his first project. And my mother as a youngster sitting on Edward's shoulders in a park. "Family is complicated," he added, his voice gentler than I'd ever heard it. "Your grandmother and I did not always agree on how to raise your mother. I was frequently excessively strict and focused on growing the business. Perhaps if I had been different, your mother would have had a better relationship with money. My parents had not only stolen from me, but also betrayed the father who had tried to secure his granddaughter's future. It was the closest thing to vulnerability I had ever seen from my grandfather, and it helped me understand that the betrayal had layers beyond my own pain. I agreed to meet with my parents 1 month after my birthday. The legal mediation was scheduled at Edward's attorney's office, A sleek space in a downtown high-rise that made my parents look even more out of place than they already did. My father's face was gaunt with dark circles under his eyes, and my mother's hands trembled slightly as she clutched her purse. They had visibly aged in the past month. My parents had a single lawyer, a nervous-looking man who kept shuffling his papers. They were dressed in clothes I didn't recognize, more modest than their usual attire, and I later learned they had been forced to sell much of their designer wardrobe. The conference room was intimidatingly large for our small group, and Edward sat beside me with Martin and 2 other attorneys from his team nearby. The financial forensics team presented their findings with clinical precision, detailing the systematic draining of my trust over 7 years, which had begun with small amounts borrowed and escalated to major withdrawals. The money had funded their house purchase, cars, expensive vacations, my mother's failed attempt to start a luxury real estate agency, and my father's disastrous foray into day trading. As the evidence accumulated, my father's stance became increasingly defensive, while my mother merely gazed at the table, periodically wiping away tears. At the end of the presentation, Edward addressed my parents directly. The forensic accounting is completed. We know exactly where each dollar went. The only remaining question is whether this will be resolved civilly or criminally. My parents' attorney cleared his throat, saying, "My clients are willing to completely comply. They comprehend the seriousness of their misdeeds and want to make amends to the greatest extent feasible." "Amends?" I repeated, speaking for the first time since the meeting began. "You stole my future. You watched me suffer while living on money that was intended for me. How do you intend to make amends for that?" My father could not meet my gaze. "Iris, we never intended for things to escalate this far. It began simply, with a little loan to help get through a difficult period. Then it was easier to take a little more and more. We convinced ourselves we earned it," my mother added quietly, "for raising you, and all the sacrifices we made as parents. We promised ourselves we'd pay it back before you knew." "And the apartment?" I inquired. "The one Grandpa purchased for me 2 years ago. What was your plan there?" They exchanged remorseful looks, and my father sighed deeply. "We were renting it out. The income was being deposited into our account. While I was sharing a small apartment with a roommate, they were collecting rent on a luxury house that was meant to be mine." Edward placed a steadying hand on my shoulder and addressed my parents. "These are your alternatives. Option 1. You sign over all remaining assets purchased with trust fund funds, fully cooperate with recovery attempts, and agree to a structured repayment schedule for items that cannot be retrieved immediately. In exchange, Iris agrees not to file criminal accusations." My folks nodded enthusiastically. "Option 2, Edward said, his voice sharpening. "If you continue to obfuscate and justify your activities, we will pursue criminal charges for fraud, embezzlement, and theft. The evidence is overwhelming. You'd both face considerable prison time." "We choose option 1, my father said quickly. "We'll cooperate completely." Edward stared at me. "Iris, the decision is yours." I observed my parents, who had reared me, tucked me in at night, and applauded at my graduations, but had also gradually plundered my inheritance while watching me suffer. The contrasting emotions were overwhelming. "I don't want them in prison," I finally responded. "But I do want every penny that can be recovered. And I want them to admit precisely what they did. Not only to me, but to the whole family." Over the next few hours, my parents signed document after document, transferring assets and agreeing to the terms Edward's team had outlined. By the end of the day, I legally owned their Florida home, which would be sold, and arrangements were made to recover as many of their possessions as possible for liquidation. When the attorneys left to make copies, I found myself alone with my parents for the first time since my birthday. "Why?" I inquired calmly. "I'd like to understand how you could achieve this." My mother grabbed for my hand, and this time, I didn't back away. "We got caught up in a lifestyle we couldn't afford. Your father made several poor investments early in our marriage, and we were constantly catching up to maintain appearances. When we had your faith, it seemed like a simple solution. Just enough to help us get ahead. But it never ended. We have a problem with money," my father said, feeling sincerely ashamed for the first time. "With spending and status. We need assistance. Professional assistance. That does not excuse what we did to you, but it may help explain why. It wasn't enough. No explanation could ever be enough, but it was a start, a tiny gap in the wall of betrayal that separated us." 2 weeks later, I moved into a modest one-bedroom apartment purchased with a portion of the recovered funds. It wasn't the luxury Gold Coast property that should have been mine, but it was mine, free and clear, with no mortgage or rent to worry about. Edward had assisted me in choosing it, insisting on security features and a good location near public transportation. With Edward's guidance, I began to learn about financial management. The recovered assets, including the Florida house and various liquidated possessions, amounted to just over $1 million, a fraction of the trust's value, but still a life-changing amount for someone who had been living paycheck to paycheck. While I was initially hesitant to accept help that felt like nepotism, Edward pointed out that getting me the interview was all he had done. Earning the position was entirely up to me. A new job opportunity came through a connection of Edward's, a position at a reputable design firm with higher pay and advancement potential than my previous job. As spring turned to summer, I began to establish new routines and boundaries. I allowed limited contact with my parents, accepting brief phone calls but declining their request to visit. They had moved into a small rental apartment and were both in therapy for financial addiction, a term I had never heard before but seemed to describe their behavior accurately. Edward and I grew closer, and our weekly dinners became a fixture in my calendar. He taught me about investments and business with the same precision and attention to detail that had made him successful, and I began to see past his gruff exterior to the complex, caring man beneath. Claire, surprisingly, also became something of a friend. Having worked for Edward for over 12 years, she had stories about him that humanized him in ways I had never expected. She also proved to be an excellent mentor for professional development, guiding me through office politics and career planning with her characteristic efficiency. The most unexpected was the re-emergence of Jake, a college friend with whom I had lost touch. He contacted me after seeing me at a coffee shop near my new apartment, and our reconnection felt like finding an anchor in stormy seas. He had no connection to my family drama, no preconceived notions about who I should be, and with him, I could just be Iris, not the victim of a high-profile family betrayal. As summer faded into fall, I began to feel something I hadn't felt in months: hope. Not just for financial stability, but for rebuilding an authentically mine life based on truth rather than deception. 6 months after the revelation that changed everything, I found myself thriving in ways I could never have predicted. My position at the design firm had evolved from a basic graphic designer role to leading a small team working on a major rebranding project for a national client. Edward had helped me establish a proper financial foundation with the recovered funds, which had been carefully invested, with a portion set aside for immediate security. I now had a retirement account, health insurance that covered more than catastrophic emergencies, and an emergency fund that would sustain me for a full year if needed. For someone who had spent years counting pennies and fretting about unexpected expenses, the security was almost disorienting. I still hesitated before making simple purchases, my financial anxiety habits deeply ingrained, despite my improved circumstances. My parents continued to struggle with the consequences of their actions. They had been forced to downsize dramatically, moving from their 5-bedroom house to a small 2-bedroom apartment in a modest neighborhood. My father had taken a position at a small insurance agency, several steps down from his previous executive role, while my mother had surrendered her real estate license as part of the legal settlement and was working as an administrative assistant. The social consequences had been arguably the most difficult adjustment for them, as former acquaintances had withdrawn themselves once the story circulated through their social circle, and they were no longer invited to the country club gatherings and charity galas that had formerly been the focal point of their social calendar. After months of minimal contact, I agreed to meet them for coffee at a neutral location. They arrived early, noticeably apprehensive, with no gifts or overtures, other than a clear desire to reconnect. "We've been working with our therapist on making amends," my mother stated, her hands tightly wrapped around her coffee cup. "Not only to you, but to Edward, and to ourselves. We understand that we cannot undo what we've done. Separate accounts, strict budgets, accountability partners, we're establishing financial boundaries," my father added. "It's like recovering from any other addiction." I listened more than I spoke, seeing the changes in them. A humility that had never existed before. The absence of the designer brands and status symbols that had formerly been so important to their identity. Before we parted ways, my mother asked tentatively if we could have regular contact, perhaps over a monthly lunch, and I agreed to think about it, unwilling to commit but no longer wholly averse to the notion of a carefully formed relationship. Edward had a minor health scare in early fall, a warning from his doctor about his blood pressure that resulted in lifestyle changes and a reduced work schedule. The brush with mortality had softened him even more, making him more reflective about family relationships, despite the pain of betrayal. "Your grandmother always said that family was worth fighting for," he reminded me when we were eating supper each week. "Not worth sacrificing your self-respect or safety, but worth the effort of understanding and forgiveness when possible. Edward taught me not only about financial management, but also about resilience in the face of treachery. Despite being terribly saddened by my parents' conduct, he remained a constant presence in my life, never letting his dissatisfaction with them impair his connection with me. With Edward's encouragement, I started a small side business in graphic design consulting, working with startups that couldn't afford full-service agencies. The work was challenging and rewarding, allowing me to build something entirely on my own, independent of family connections or recovered funds. My confidence was growing not only professionally, but also personally, and the therapy sessions that had begun as crisis management had evolved into a valuable tool for examining patterns and building healthier relationships. I was learning to trust my own judgment again, to recognize that I had been a victim, not because I had failed, but because those I trusted had made terrible choices. An unexpected development occurred in the form of a surprise dinner organized by Edward 6 months to the day after my disastrous birthday. He reserved a private dining room at a restaurant even more posh than the one where our family had crumbled, but this time the atmosphere was completely different. When I arrived, I found not only Edward, but also Claire, Martin, my cousin Sophia, and even Jake gathering to celebrate what Edward referred to as my half-birthday. 6 months ago, your life changed in ways no one could have predicted, Edward remarked, raising a glass in salute. Tonight, we celebrate not what was lost, but what you have built from the ashes. After dinner, Edward handed me a little box containing a key and a deed to a new apartment, modest but secure, with a short commute to my office. The Gold Coast property was sold as part of the recovery efforts, he said. This one is all yours. Purchased with recovered monies, but chosen expressly for your current life, not the one that was taken from you. The gesture drove me to tears, not because of its monetary value, but because it symbolized a clean break with the past, a new beginning free of betrayal. My relationship with Sophia had evolved from a cautious connection to a genuine friendship, free of the artificial competition that had characterized our earlier interactions. We discovered shared interests and complementary personalities, and she had even invested in my side business, providing capital for expansion in exchange for a small equity stake, which Edward had helped structure to ensure fairness for both of us. I always thought you had the perfect family, she confessed over a lunch date. It's strange how we envied each other for things that weren't even real. Jake had become more than a friend in recent months. Our coffee dates had turned into dinner dates and long conversations that often lasted late into the evening, and he had been present through the worst of the aftermath without attempting to fix or minimize my pain, instead providing steady support and the occasional necessary distraction. When he kissed me for the first time on a walk along the lakefront near my new apartment, it seemed like I was crossing a threshold into a new part of my life, free of treachery. Our relationship was built on honesty. From the start, I used a portion of my recovered funds to establish a small mentorship program for young designers from disadvantaged backgrounds, providing scholarships for software training and professional development. Although the program was still in its early stages, helping others who faced financial barriers to creative careers gave me a sense of purpose that went beyond my personal experience. As autumn went to winter, I understood that, while betrayal will always be a part of my tale, it no longer dominated my everyday existence. I was creating something new, something authentic, based on the painful truth, rather than the comfortable lies. 1 year after the birthday that changed everything, I found myself in a place I never could have imagined. Not just financially comfortable, but emotionally stronger, with clearer boundaries and deeper, more honest connections than I had before the betrayal. The healing process had not been straightforward. There were still days when my wrath would flare up suddenly, and the recollection of those years of useless struggle would feel fresh and raw. But these times were becoming less common as I built a fuller life. My parents and I had established a cautious reconciliation process. We met monthly for lunch with clear boundaries and expectations, and they had shown genuine remorse by continuing their therapy and making small but consistent restitution payments that Edward's team had structured as part of their amends process. I never thought I would sit at a table with them again without feeling rage, I revealed to my therapist during one of our now bi-weekly sessions. It is not forgetting or even complete forgiveness yet, but it is something like peace. Edward's financial education had transformed my relationship with money, and I now manage my investments with confidence, understanding the balance between security and growth. The remaining trust funds, though much smaller than they should have been, were carefully managed to provide long-term stability while allowing me to live comfortably in the present. Despite the betrayal and the legal ramifications, Edward was still my grandfather and my parents' father, and our time together was limited and precious, even with the shadow of his past actions. Edward had a more serious health scare, which required a brief hospitalization, and the fragility of his death brought perspective to our family situation. During his recovery, I spent hours at his bedside, learning more about his early years, his relationship with my grandmother, his regrets, and his triumphs. These conversations helped me understand not only him, but also the complex family dynamics that had contributed to my parents' actions, though they were never excused. My design job had taken off, and my side business had grown to the point where I was considering turning it into a full-time venture. I had hired 2 junior designers to help with the increasing client load and a business manager to handle the administrative aspects that I had little interest in. The mentorship program had also expanded, with 5 young designers now receiving scholarships and professional guidance. Seeing them grow in confidence and skill gave me a sense of satisfaction unlike anything I had ever felt professionally. Jake and I had grown steadily closer, and our relationship, built on a foundation of transparency, was something I now recognized had been missing from most of my previous relationships, familial and romantic alike. He had his own apartment, but spent most nights at mine, and our lives intertwined in a way that felt natural and effortless. "Do you know what amazes me the most about you?" he commented one evening as we cooked supper together in my kitchen. "How you've taken something that could have made you bitter and turned it into growth instead." The apartment had truly become my home, filled with art and books that reflected my taste, adorned in colors that brought me delight. It was modest in comparison to what could have been mine if the trust had remained intact, but it was totally mine in a manner that the Gold Coast house would never have been. My cousin Sophia and I had developed a genuine friendship that had surprised us both. The artificial competition that had characterized our previous relationship had given way to mutual support and understanding, and she had even joined the board of the mentorship program, contributing both funds and connections. On the anniversary of the revelation, I hosted a small gathering at my apartment. Edward was there, looking fiercer than I'd like to admit, but still sharp as ever, as were Sophia and Jake, Claire, and a few close friends from work. My parents were noticeably absent, not because they weren't invited, but because they recognized that this was not a milestone they should be a part of. As we ate at my dining table, I felt an overwhelming sense of thankfulness for these folks who had become my chosen family. "A year ago I thought my life was destroyed," I said, raising my glass as a toast. "What I've learned since then is that when the foundation is revealed to be false, you have the opportunity to build something true in its place." Edward nodded in agreement, his eyes filled with unshed tears. "To truth," he simply whispered, raising his glass to meet mine. "To the truth," the others repeated. Later, after the visitors had left and only Jake remained to assist me in loading the dishwasher in peaceful stillness, I reflected on the deeper lessons of the previous year. Financial prosperity, while offering security and opportunity, was not the most valued currency. Trust, authenticity, and self-awareness were far more valuable and difficult to recover once damaged. I had learnt that forgiveness was a process that did not require forgetting or excusing but did eventually result in a lighter burden of wrath. Most importantly, I had learned that, while we cannot choose what happens to us, we do have complete control over how we respond and what we create from both gifts and wrecks. The betrayal would always be a part of my tale, a chapter that could not be erased, but it would not be the defining one. Rather, it was the one that compelled me to take charge of the narrative and write the remainder with purpose and honesty. My girlfriend chose her squad over me. Months later, the squad fell apart, and she demanded I come back. I gave her 30 seconds to leave. I thought relationships were meant for 2 people, but mine always felt like it came with 4 extra. My 27-year-old self had been with Jennifer, 25, for nearly 2 years, and while I once believed we had something special, lately it seemed like I was dating her entire squad instead of just her. We moved in together 6 months ago, split the bills and chores evenly, and tried to build a life. But with Linnea, Cassian, Murray, and Dorian constantly in the picture, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd become just another name on her group chat. And then came the last straw. For the last time, my 27-year-old male girlfriend and 25-year-old female chose her friendship over our relationship. I am done. I don't know where to begin with this mess. I've been with Jennifer for nearly 2 years, and I felt we had something special. We moved in together 6 months ago and split everything, even the housework, evenly. But now, I feel like I'm dating 5 individuals rather than 1. Here is the thing. Jennifer has a close circle of friends, including Linnea, Cassian, Murray, and Dorian. They name themselves the squad without irony, and they basically do everything together. Group discussions are active 24 hours a day, with matching Halloween costumes. At first I thought it was nice that she had such close pals. Now I'm wondering if I'm even in a relationship, or if he's simply paying half the rent. The breaking point occurred last weekend. Our 2-year anniversary was approaching, and I had planned the entire evening. We made reservations at the venue where we had our first actual date. I got tickets to see the band she's been obsessed with. Nothing outrageously pricey, but thoughtful items. I discovered her in the living room, looking through Instagram stories about her friends' weekend adventures. "Hey, so I've got something special planned for our anniversary next Saturday," I said as I sat down next to her. She looked up from her phone and I swear her expression was as if I had informed her someone had died. "Oh." She slowly laid the phone down. "Oh babe, that's the same night as Mireille's birthday pregame. You know I can't miss that." My stomach dropped slightly, but I tried to seem calm. "Well, what if you asked them if you could reschedule for Friday night or Sunday?" She was already shaking her head before I finished speaking. No, you don't understand. Mireille specifically planned it for Saturday because it's literally the only night everyone can make it. Cassian's got that big work conference starting Sunday. And Linnea's been so stressed with her new job that she really needs this, and Dorian just broke up with that girl he was seeing, so he needs us right now too. I observed her expression as she spoke, and she became more passionate, as if she was warming up for her argument. "We really need this night, Rowan. The group hasn't been together properly in weeks." "But it's our anniversary," I protested, and I hated how little my voice sounded. "This only happens once a year. You can see your friends literally any other time." That was when her entire demeanor shifted. She sat back, crossed her arms, and gave me the look that suggested I was being completely unreasonable. "Love can wait, but friendship can't. They were here before you, and they'll be here after." I was simply staring at her. The words struck me like a physical blow. They'll be here after. Not if something happens to us, not, God forbid, that we break up. But a casual matter-of-fact after, as if our breakup had already been scheduled between next month's group vacation and Linnea's birthday party. Despite everything we've accomplished together, I'm still just a transitory fixture that can be rescheduled around brunch arrangements. This is not the first time either. Instead of celebrating my master's graduation, she attended Cassian's housewarming celebration. My brother's wedding was last month, and she was too fatigued from a 3-day celebration with the squad to come as my +1. Jennifer was unable to visit my mother while she was in the hospital for surgery because it interfered with their weekly game night. However, she expects me to drop everything when she wants something. Last month she called me at 2 a.m. to pick her up from a dive bar across town since Dorian was too drunk to drive safely. When I arrived, she barely greeted me and continued taking selfies with everyone while I stood there like an Uber driver, then spent the entire journey home discussing the drama between Linnea and some man from the pub. The worst aspect is how she discusses our connection with them. I overheard her on the phone with Mireille last week, talking about how I'm going through a jealous period and need to learn to share her time more effectively, as if I were an insecure teenager rather than her partner, who simply wants to feel like a priority at times. I tried to talk to her about balance and how relationships need to be nurtured. She always swears to do better, but then makes arrangements that exclude me. When I bring out the pattern, she accuses me of attempting to distance her from her pals. There is no victory. I'm writing from a coffee shop since I couldn't tolerate being in our apartment any longer. I spent the entire morning looking at places online. I found a decent one-bedroom around 20 minutes away that I can afford on my own. The leasing application is currently in my email drafts. I adore her, but I can't keep ranking 6th in my own relationship. My pals believe I should provide her an ultimatum, but honestly, I'm tired of begging people to spend time with me. Is it unreasonable to expect your girlfriend to occasionally want to be your girlfriend? Edit. Reading all of these answers has been very eye-opening. To everyone who has asked why I haven't just stopped it, you are correct. I keep hope she will recognize what she is doing, but she has made it clear where her priorities lie. I'm going to submit the rental application when I get home. Update 1. The original post blew up far more than I imagined. Thank you for all your help and suggestions. I wish I could say this story ended happily, with us working things out, but you'll see. So I submitted the rental application the same day. I got authorized within 48 hours, which felt like a sign. I spent the next week quietly transferring my belongings while Jennifer was out with the squad, which was convenient because it happened almost every day. By the time she recognized something was wrong, I had already relocated almost 80% of my belongings. She returned home at midnight on Thursday night, having allegedly gone to a new rooftop bar that Dorian wanted to visit, and noticed that my gaming equipment was missing. I heard her yell my name from the living room, her voice rising with each room she examined. Rowan, what the hell is going on here? "Where's all your stuff?" She found me in our bedroom, packing up the remainder of my clothes. She remained at the doorway for a moment, inspecting the room as if she were taking inventory of what was missing. Are you moving out?" Her voice cracked slightly with the last word. I gave her the letter I had written. I tried to make it simple and honest, saying that I needed to be with someone who wanted to prioritize our relationship, and that I couldn't continue to feel like an afterthought in her life. She read it quickly, then gradually, her eyes widening. She gazed up at me as if I were a stranger. "You're seriously leaving me because I have friends? Because I won't ditch the people who have been there for me for years?" I sat down on the edge of the bed, tired. "Jennifer, it's not about you having friends." "Then what is it about?" she demanded, waving the letter. "Because this whole thing reads like you want me to choose between you and everyone I care about." "I want you to care about me too," I added quietly. "I want to feel like I matter to you. Like our relationship matters." She looked at me as if I had suggested something insane. "Of course you matter, but I can't just abandon my friends every time you want attention." I felt something twist in my chest. "Jennifer, I asked you to spend one evening with me for our anniversary one, and I explained why. That night was important, more important than us." She flung her hands up. "This is ridiculous, Rowan. You're throwing away 2 years because you can't handle me having a social life. You knew who I was when we started dating." I looked at her, really looked at her, and understood she did not comprehend. In her opinion, I was the problem. I was being unreasonable. "I thought I knew who you were," I replied, rising up and shutting the bag. "I thought you were someone who wanted to build something with me. I do want to build something with you, but not if it means cutting off everyone else in my life. I'm not asking you to cut them off. I'm asking you to make space for me too." But she was already shaking her head, and I could tell from her eyes that we were going in circles. She interpreted this as me being domineering. I viewed it as fundamental relationship upkeep. There was no middle ground that we both wanted to discover. After another 20 minutes of repeating the same arguments, I raised my hands. "I'm done, Jennifer. I'm done arguing about this." "Done arguing or done with us?" "Both." The finality in my speech appeared to strike her. Then her entire posture altered, as if she knew this wasn't just a conflict we'd gotten through. That's when things turned weird. She began following me throughout the apartment, detailing everything we'd done together and the memories we'd created. Even so, every other phrase mentioned her friends. "Remember when we went to that concert and ran into Linnea and Cassian? What about the time we cooked dinner for the whole squad?" It was as if she couldn't even imagine moments that were only about us. I promised her I'd return for the remainder of my belongings over the weekend when she was at Murray's pool party, because of course, there was one. I left my key on the kitchen counter and walked out. But obviously leaving was not enough for her. Saturday morning, I'm in my new place, finally feeling like I can breathe again, when my phone starts acting up. Jennifer is phoning non-stop and sending paragraph-long texts about how we need to discuss things out like grown-ups. When I didn't respond, she started having the squad message me. Linnea sent me a long text about Jennifer's devastation and how I'm splitting up the family. Dorian called me immature for leaving instead of working things out. Cassian took a fair approach and suggested that we all meet to discuss matters. Even Murray, with whom I'd had maybe 10 talks in 2 years, felt entitled to tell me I was making a mistake. The messages became increasingly hostile as the day progressed. Things like, "You're going to regret this, and Jennifer deserves better anyway." By Sunday evening, they were labeling me emotionally abusive for leaving her without notice, despite the letter I'd written explaining everything. Then Monday night occurred. I arrived home from work to see all 5 of them standing outside my new building. Jennifer was in the front, with the squad arranged behind her like an intervention team. As soon as she saw me, she began talking so loudly that neighbors looked out their windows. "We need to settle this right now. You don't get to just disappear and ignore everyone. We're all adults here." I assured them that there was nothing to settle. I'd made a decision. I had given my reasoning, and I was not changing my mind. That's when Dorian came forward with this gem. "Dude, you're being a selfish piece of, do you know how much you're hurting her? How much you're hurting all of us?" All of them. I questioned what I had done to hurt people I barely knew. Apparently by dating Jennifer, I had become a part of their family system, and leaving her meant abandoning all of them. You could only image my expression while listening to this pure rubbish. It was the most codependent thing I had ever heard. The entire situation seemed strange. Chloe was crying. Cassian kept attempting to mediate. Murray was recording everything on her phone, For what? I have no idea. Jennifer just stood there nodding, as if this were all totally typical behavior. I gave them exactly 30 seconds to depart my home before calling building security. When they didn't move and kept asking me to figure things out like an adult, I went inside and did just that. Security appeared and requested them to leave, which they did, but not before Jennifer yelled that it wasn't over. It was 3 weeks ago. The calls and texts have now ceased, but I continue to receive messages from random numbers, most likely from people using someone else's phone. I doubt they would try to come to my building again. Building management is already aware of their presence. I don't regret leaving, but I'm amazed at how insane things became. Who takes their complete friend group to abuse their ex? What type of mature behavior is that? Update 2. Back with another update. I honestly didn't expect to be posting more about this subject, but it appears that life has a sense of humor. First and foremost, everything is going great on my end. The new apartment is amazing. Work has been busy but fulfilling, and I've been reconnecting with pals I'd neglected over the Jennifer years. It turns out that when you don't spend every weekend as the designated driver for someone else's social circle, you have more time for your own connections. Who knew? The true tragedy here, however, is what has happened to Jennifer and the infamous squad. My friend Callista works with Cassian, and it appears like the group dynamics have shifted. Remember how I said Cassian was becoming serious with his girlfriend Callista? Well, they got engaged 2 weeks ago. Callista has been vocal about her belief that the entire group setup is immature, and she has pushed Cassian to set better boundaries. Cassian, according to Callista, has been gradually withdrawing from the constant group activities, missing the weekly hangouts, responding to the group chat less frequently, and focusing on his romance instead. Sounds familiar? Jennifer appeared to lose it when Cassian stated he couldn't make their yearly weekend trip to the beach house since he and Callista had already booked a trip to see her parents. "You're becoming just like Rowan," she purportedly said, because God forbid that someone prioritizes their romantic relationship over weekend beach vacations. But things get better. Linnea received a raise at work that requires her to relocate to Portland. She's been attempting to schedule virtual hangouts and visits, but Jennifer's been icy about it all. Apparently she made a remark about how true friends do not leave the group for professional chances. Linnea naturally feels upset by this reaction to what should be positive news. Then there's the Murray/Dorian dilemma. I never got the complete story while dating Jennifer, but apparently they've had an on and off relationship for years that everyone pretends isn't occurring. It's happening again, but this time they're serious enough to want to date rather than just hook up at group activities. Jennifer is not handling this well because it alters the group dynamic, and she is concerned about what would happen if they split apart. So let me get this straight. When I complained about being deprioritized, I was being controlling and selfish. But now, when she feels devalued by her friends, it's a tragedy, and everyone abandons her. The best thing, according to Callista's girlfriend, who is pals with her, is that Jennifer has been going around telling everyone that everyone is pulling a Rowan on her. Like wanting to mature and form adult relationships is some sort of betrayal epidemic that I initiated. I don't think she realizes that no one is taking her seriously anymore. Meanwhile, I'm having real fun for the first time in months. I went to a concert last weekend with some college pals I hadn't seen in forever. No group coordination is necessary. Nobody insisted on taking an Instagram snapshot every 5 minutes, and I wasn't forced to leave early because someone required emotional support for their newest drama. It was revolutionary. I've also been seeing somebody new. Nothing serious yet, but Alara is pleasant. She has close friends, but she recognizes that relationships require one-on-one time to develop. Isn't this a novel concept? We had supper Friday night, just the two of us, and she didn't look at her phone once. It didn't occur to me how odd that was till later. But this is when things become really fascinating. 3 days earlier, I received an SMS from Jennifer. This is the first direct interaction since the apartment building confrontation. "Hey, I know things ended badly between us, but I've been doing a lot of thinking. Maybe we could grab coffee sometime. I feel like we both said things we didn't mean." What the hell? I just sat there staring at my phone for about a minute, after months of pure stillness, and now this. It felt like being sucker punched out of nowhere. I did not react right away, but she sent another one yesterday. I know I made mistakes. I was young and didn't understand how to balance everything, but I've been learning and growing, and I think we could try again if you're open to it. I showed Callista the texts, and he simply chuckled. Jennifer apparently received word that I've been doing well, that I'm seeing someone new, and that I appear to be truly happier. Callista believes she is discovering that having a loyal lover was not such a bad thing after all. However, the timing is quite significant, as her buddy group is gradually evolving and she is confronted with the truth that people grow up, and their priorities shift. She has suddenly expressed a desire to reconsider our relationship. Where was all this learning and growing as I begged her to understand my emotions for 2 years? I am not replying to your mails. I do not owe her a coffee date or the opportunity to explain herself. I spent 2 years trying to convince her to understand what I needed from a partnership, but she constantly dismissed those demands. I'm not interested in being her fallback plan now that her major social structure is shifting. Edit. Some folks are wondering if I believe she has truly changed, or if this is purely for convenience. Honestly, it doesn't matter. Even if she has gained some knowledge about relationships, I have moved on. I'm creating something fresh with someone who already knows what a partnership looks like. Why would I go backwards? Final update. This is probably my final article regarding the subject, but I wanted to relate how things ended because so many of you have been following along. The Jennifer text messages persisted for about a week following my previous update. Nothing forceful or manipulative, rather she was looking for the ideal combination of words to elicit a response from me. Some highlights. I finally understand what you meant about balance. I see it now. The group isn't the same anymore. I think I was using everyone to avoid dealing with real intimacy. I miss talking to you, not even about getting back together, just talking. The last one almost got me. We used to have amazing chats, particularly early in our relationship. But I recalled myself that good discussion does not imply good relationship, and I remained mute. Things came to a head last Tuesday. Alara and I were having dinner at this downtown Italian restaurant when I noticed Jennifer, Dorian and Mireille sitting at a corner table. Cassian and Linnea were noticeably absent. Cassian was apparently attending a couple's event with his fiancée, while Linnea was already in Portland settling into her new life. Jennifer noticed me before I could recommend we go. Our gazes met across the restaurant, and I could see her considering whether to come over. Alara observed my tenseness and asked whether everything was fine. I briefly stated the problem. She was aware of my ex's attempts to contact me, but she was unaware of the entire extent of the situation. To her credit, Jennifer did not cause a scene. She gave me a little wave before appearing to engage in an animated conversation with Dorian and Mireille. I thought that was the end of it. However, when Alara and I were leaving, Jennifer approached us near the exit. "Rowan, hey, I don't want to interrupt your evening, but could I talk to you for just a minute?" Alara clasped my hand and said she'd wait by the car. Probably the most gracious manner anyone has ever approached meeting their partner's ex. Jennifer looked different. "Perhaps you're tired, or simply getting older." She started talking swiftly, as if she had practiced it. "I know you haven't been responding to my messages, and I understand why. I just wanted to say that you were right about everything. About the balance, about priorities, about what a real relationship should look like. I see Cassian with Callista, and I watch how they support each other, and I realize I never did that with you. I told her I appreciated her saying that, but it didn't change anything between us. I know I'm not asking for another chance. I just needed you to know that I understand now. And I'm sorry, really, genuinely sorry for how I treated you, and how I reacted when you left." It was the first time she'd apologized without qualification or explanation. She looked over to Alara in the parking lot, and smiled sadly. "She seems lovely. I hope she appreciates what she has." And that was all. She returned to her table. I went to my car, and Alara inquired if I was all right. I realized I really was. The ironic conclusion to all of this. I learned from Callista that the squad is nearly finished. Cassian is completely dedicated to his new life with Callista, and he seldom speaks to the gang anymore. Linnea adores Portland and has found acquaintances through work. Mireille and Dorian are now dating, but it appears that they want to get away from the group dynamic that has complicated their lives for so long. Jennifer has been trying to keep the group together by organizing activities and sending wistful messages about the good times. However, you cannot force people to continue in a dynamic that they have outgrown. She is learning what I tried to tell her months ago. That all partnerships involve reciprocal investment and understanding. When people believe they cannot be real or pursue their own growth, they leave. As for me and Alara, things are going well. She met some of my friends last weekend, and everything went smoothly. Nobody felt they had to perform or compete for attention. Just grown-ups hanging around and getting to know one another. She's mentioned taking a weekend trip together next month, just the two of us. The fact that this appears normal and exciting rather than selfish or threatening reveals everything I need to know about the distinction between healthy and unhealthy relationship patterns. I don't have any nasty wishes for Jennifer. I hope she can figure out how to make connections without jeopardizing other essential relationships. But I'm pleased I had the fortitude to leave when I did. Sometimes the finest thing you can do for yourself is refuse to accept being treated as an option. You're such an idiot, my brother laughed after he stole my identity to buy a $45,000 truck. Now he ended up with 2 years in federal prison. Hello Reddit. My brother took my money for a truck and using my identity, so I sued him. He believed that familial connections would save him. The federal penitentiary disagreed. It turns out I wasn't the only one he had defrauded. Before we begin, let me establish the scene. I am 29, male, and have been working as an electrician in Kansas City for the past 8 years. I began as an apprentice, earning $12.80 per hour, getting shocked on a daily basis, and being treated like trash by journeymen who believed hazing was a personality feature. Now I run my own crew, make 6 figures when the business is solid, and own my home completely in Brookside. Not bad for a guy who started with nothing but a high school certificate and a tenacity that stretched the length of Interstate 70. Everything was built from scratch. There are no family links, no silver spoons. The early days were terrible. I recall one job when I had to crawl into a century-old warehouse basement, fighting rats and asbestos insulation, to install new wire for some cheapskate who believed code compliance was a suggestion. I spent 14 hours in that hellhole, returned home looking like I had been dragged behind a vehicle, and earned $180 for the day. However, every money went into my never work for someone else again fund. My breakthrough came when I was awarded a contract to rewire the old Kemper Arena, which was being converted into junior sports facilities. 6 months of consistent work, a decent team, and enough profit to eventually purchase my own truck and some genuine equipment. That was when I realized I could make this work. My 26-year-old brother Dylan is a master at professional disappointment. I dropped out of community college after 1 semester and bounced between entry-level retail jobs and get-rich-quick scams that usually ended the same way, him contacting me at midnight asking for bail money. I paid for his first semester, $2,800, because he promised to study. When I discovered he had been spending his days at the student union playing video games, I drove to college and spoke with him. "You want to drop out? Fine, but you're paying me back the tuition money, bro. That's not how college works. Sometimes you have to pivot, and sometimes you just have to stop talking and finish what you started." He never repaid me. While I was crawling around 120-degree attics and getting my hands ripped up on metal conduit, Dylan was producing TikTok videos about the entrepreneurial attitude and lecturing to anyone who would listen why manual labor was for suckers with no vision. My cousin Caleb and I used to watch his movies when we needed a giggle after a particularly bad workday. Nothing like seeing your brother explain passive income while living in your parents' basement and stealing their groceries. Our folks are full enablers. Mom handled Dylan as if he were Steve Jobs trapped in a Best Buy employee's body. Dad insisted that Dylan only needed the proper opportunity. When Dylan was fired from GameStop for regularly showing up late, Mom drove him to work for 2 weeks until he found another job. When it turned out to be a pyramid business selling energy drinks, Dad went through a 40-minute presentation on residual income. "He's got enthusiasm," Dad would say. "That's worth something." "So does a golden retriever," I'll reply. "Doesn't mean you give it a credit card." I was the responsible person who could handle his difficulties. Dylan was the creative one who simply required more time to work things out. The double standard irritated me the most. When I first started my electrical business, I asked Dad for a small loan of $3,000 to purchase equipment and licensing expenses. The answer was, "Son, you need to learn to stand on your own feet. Building character means handling your own problems." However, when Dylan required money for his enterprises, family support became critical to success. For many years I played along. Family is family, right? I imagined he'd grow up, discover what real labor was like, and maybe even thank me for keeping him afloat. Wrong. I made the error of assuming Dylan only needed actual work experience about 3 months prior to the truck incident. Real work. I worked on a residential project in Leawood, rewiring a lawyer's 1960s built property. Mr. Whitaker, the homeowner, was one of those old-school guys who valued craftsmanship and made timely payments. Easy money, uncomplicated job, and my crew could finish it in 4 days. That's when I had the wonderful idea to bring Dylan along as a helper. Give him the opportunity to see what real work looks like. Maybe learn a trade and get some goddamn work ethic. "You want me to do what?" Dylan asked when I called him. "Work? I don't know anything about electrical work." "That's why it's called learning. You carry tools, hand me stuff and try not to electrocute yourself, $15 an hour to start." $15 an hour seemed generous for someone whose only qualification was sharing my DNA. But I believed that if he could do basic labor for a week without making a mistake, there could be some possibility. When do I start? Tomorrow 7 a.m. sharp. Wear work boots and clothes you don't mind getting dirty. 7 a.m.? Dude, that's early. Day 1. Dylan showed up around 8:30 a.m. Sorry I'm late. My alarm didn't go off and then I had to stop for coffee because... Save it. Here's your safety gear. I gave him a hard hat, safety glasses, and work gloves. He looked at them as if I had handed him medieval torture instruments. Do I really need all this? It's just a house. You really want to explain to Mom why you're in the ER? Because you were too cool for safety equipment? For the first hour, everything went well. I had him organize tools and transport supplies upstairs. Basic nonsense that even Dylan couldn't botch up. Then I instructed him to get my wire strippers from the blue toolbox in the vehicle. 10 minutes later, he returned empty-handed. They sat directly on top. Dylan, are you serious? Yeah, there's like a million tools in there. I don't know what wire strippers look like. I went to the truck myself. The wire strippers were resting right on top of the other equipment, just where I had left them. The breaking point occurred on day 3. I was working in Whitaker's daughter's bedroom. She returned home from college for the summer. Nice youngster, a pre-med student who works at Country Club Plaza to help pay for school. I left Dylan to organize tools in the corridor while I installed new outlets along the baseboards. When I returned 20 minutes later, he was gone. I caught him on the back patio, trying to gain the girl's number. So, you're studying medicine. That's cool. I'm actually an entrepreneur myself. Ever heard of social media marketing? The poor girl seemed trapped, delivering polite remarks while clearly wanting to flee. Her face lit up with relief as she saw me. Okay, good. Brody's back. I was just telling your brother about my organic chemistry class. I grabbed Dylan's arm and drew him away. What the hell are you doing? Just being friendly. You said customer service was important. Customer service means being polite and professional, not hitting on the client's daughter while you're supposed to be working. I was networking. That evening Mr. Whitaker approached me as we were closing up. Brody, I don't want to tell you how to run your business, but your helper seems a bit unfocused. He spent 20 minutes explaining to my daughter why college was a waste of time. She's a Dean's List student working toward medical school. I wanted to disappear into the floor. The final calamity occurred the next morning. I gave him a simple task. Transfer the extension ladder from the front yard to the rear. He dragged the fully extended ladder around the house, catching a gutter, pulling down the electricity line, and knocking the meter half off the wall. I heard the boom from inside and dashed outside to find Dylan standing next to a 40-foot ladder entangled in power lines, the electricity meter dangling at an unsafe angle. It just got stuck, he explained, as if this was an inescapable act of God. Before we could make any repairs, the power company had to come out and de-energize the lines. Mr. Whitaker was without electricity for 6 hours. The repair cost me $1,200 out of pocket, plus an awkward chat regarding liability insurance. Dylan stated, I don't understand why you're so mad, as I drove him home that evening. Accidents happen. Accidents happen when you're being careful and something goes wrong. This happened because you were being lazy and stupid. That was it. Done. No more chances. No more family favors. No more attempting to help someone who refused to be helped. 3 months later, he contacted me with some new BS. He called during an emergency task. Some guy attempted to build his own breaker box and nearly burned down half of Midtown. My phone exploded as I was elbow deep in cleaning up his mess. Emergency. Need $10,800 today or I'm getting evicted. I left the job site to deal with Dylan's dilemma, spending 2 hours on the phone with his landlord, who patiently explained that Dylan was 2 months past on rent and had been too busy with projects to return his calls. The landlord, Steve, was actually rather nice about it. Look, your brother seems like a nice kid, but nice doesn't pay rent. I've got bills too. What's he been telling you about the money situation? Said he was waiting on a big contract to come through, some marketing deal that was going to pay him 15 grand. I was almost embarrassed. He'd purchased a $600 gaming chair the week before. When I confronted him, he said it was a business investment because Twitch stardom evidently needed lumbar support, so I told him I couldn't assist. The tantrum was fantastic, with me yelling about how I had forgotten where I came from and how prosperity had caused me to look down on my family. The tag team guilt assault began. Mom called, crying because Dylan would be homeless. Dad called, disappointed, and asked if this was the guy I had become. What if it was you who needed help, son? Dad, if it was me, I'd get a second job, or a first job, or any job. But I felt guilty about it. It always has. I caved. I sent the money. 3 weeks later, Dylan shared Instagram stories from a music festival discussing the importance of investing in experiences over material possessions. That's when it struck me. I wasn't assisting family. My folks cheered from the sidelines while I subsidized a mature man's Peter Pan complex. The enormous electricity contract I got from the city was meant to be my ticket to finally having some breathing room. Worked steadily for 2 years, had an 8-man crew, and had enough money to consider getting married and creating my own family, which made me an even more appealing target for family vultures. However, I had begun to decline minor requests, which upset them. Dylan had been abnormally silent in the week prior to the truck collision. There were no desperate phone calls, no unexpected situations, and no visits when he happened to be in the area around dinner time. Caleb sent me a message. Heads up. Saw Dylan at the Ford dealership yesterday pointing at trucks and talking on the phone. Looks sketchy as hell. Caleb is the only family member with his mind screwed on straight. Worked in construction, paid his own expenses, and called shit what it was. When family dinners evolved into Dylan pity parties, Caleb and I would usually wind up on the back porch talking about everyday things like sports and work, while the adults inside tried to figure out why Dylan couldn't find work. Think he's finally getting a job that requires a truck, I texted back. Yeah, and I'm thinking about becoming a ballet dancer. Dude was wearing a button-down shirt that still had creases from the package. Caleb messaged me. Heads up. Saw Dylan at the Ford dealership yesterday pointing at trucks and talking on the phone. Looked sketchy as hell. We were both mistaken. I should have listened, but I was preoccupied with a business project downtown. I'm sitting in my truck after a 12-hour shift, coated in dust and feeling like I've been hit by a freight train. Some clever contractor had wired an entire office building like he was playing electrical Jenga, and my staff spent the day correcting his amateurish work. The owner of the building was also a nasty jerk. I kept wondering why we couldn't just make it function rather than getting everything up to code. It appears that fire safety was optional in his environment. I only wanted a drink and 8 hours of sleep. That's when Dylan emailed me a photograph. Consider this. A brand new Ford F-150 candy apple red parked in our parents' driveway like it owned the area. Chrome running boards, tinted windows, the works. This was not a work truck. This $45,000 statement piece proclaimed, I'm compensating for something. Dylan is standing next to it with the biggest shit-eating grin I've ever seen. Keys dangled from his finger like if he had won the lotto. Caption. Thanks for the truck, bro. You're such an idiot. My blood pressure was so high that I believed I was having a stroke. See, we hadn't spoken in over 2 weeks. Things have become heated since I refused to send money. So I opened my banking application. $8,200, Ford Motors credit. The down payment was processed. The charge came from a credit card I rarely used. One of those emergency-only cards I received years ago and forgot about. But Dylan had the number. He had somehow convinced Ford Credit that he was me. I just sat there staring at the screen, the engine still running, as every curse word raced through my mind. The kid who had spent months explaining why he couldn't keep his job at GameStop had just cheated me of a luxury truck he had no right owning. But here's something he didn't know. I was finished. I didn't call him, text him, or give him the opportunity to fabricate a narrative about misunderstandings or emergencies. The first call is to Ford Credit. I need to report fraudulent use of my credit for a vehicle purchase. Oh my. Let me pull up the account. Yes, I see the transaction. Are you saying this wasn't authorized? Unless I've developed multiple personality disorder, no, I didn't buy a truck. I'll flag this immediately. The vehicle will need to be repossessed within 24 hours. Perfect. Don't call the person who picked it up. Just show up and take it. Michelle, a Ford Credit representative, was very helpful after realizing this was legitimate fraud. It turned out that they'd been seeing more identity theft cases recently, and she walked me through the full procedure. We'll need you to file a police report and send us the case number. The faster you do that, the faster we can get this resolved. Already on it. The second call is from Caleb. Are you busy tomorrow morning? Why? Want to watch Dylan's truck get repoed? Jesus Christ, what did he do? Stole $8,000 from me to buy it. A long pause. I'll bring coffee. Caleb later informed me that his initial impression was that Dylan had finally crossed a threshold that our parents couldn't overlook. He was also mistaken about that, but at least one member of the family possessed a working moral compass. Third, I called the Kansas City Police Department's criminal fraud hotline and reported identity theft, credit fraud, and forgeries. Case number, documents, and the works. Officer Hayes, the cop who took my report, had previously witnessed this type of familial scam. 9 times out of 10, it's relatives, he told me. They think blood relation gives them access to your credit. What happens now? We investigate. If the evidence supports your claim, and it sounds like it will, we'll file charges. Fair warning though, family cases get ugly fast. He was not kidding. By 6 p.m., my phone had a seizure. Call after call. Text after text. Dude, what's happening? Ford says they're taking the truck back. This has to be some kind of mistake. Can you please call them and fix this? I responded with a message. Talk to my lawyer. That was bullshit. I didn't have a lawyer yet. But Caleb's brother-in-law was a prosecutor, and he'd given me the name of Rachel Smith, a lady who specialized in financial crimes and reportedly ate fraud cases for breakfast. I phoned her office. I laid her the entire story. The truck. The photo, and Dylan's history of treating me like his personal bank. When I came to the section about his using my credit card without permission, she made this noise. Not quite a laugh, but certainly satisfaction. How old is your brother? 26. Good. Adults get adult consequences. Can you be here at 9 a.m. tomorrow? Absolutely. That night I received a call from Dad. Brody, we need to talk. This whole thing with the truck is getting out of hand. You're right. Your son committed multiple felonies. That's definitely out of hand. It's not that serious. He made a mistake. Dad, he stole my identity to buy a truck, not borrowed money. Stole my identity. He's family, Brody. Family doesn't sue family. Family doesn't commit felonies against family either. But here we are. I hung up. My phone rang again quickly. I turned it off. The next morning, Caleb arrived at 7 a.m. With coffee and donuts, we are ready for the show. We parked across the street from my folks' home and waited. At 8:47 a.m., a tow truck arrived with 2 men who obviously did this for a livelihood. The repo team was incredibly efficient. They simply linked it up and rolled out as if it were routine. Dylan dashed out of the house in pajama pants, waving his hands like he was directing air traffic. Even from across the street we could hear him saying, "There's been a mistake. That's my truck." The repo man didn't even slow down, just hooked it up and sped off. Dylan stood in the driveway for 10 minutes, staring at the oil smear where his truck had been. That, Caleb replied, taking a sip of coffee, is the most beautiful thing I've seen all week. Then I visited Rachel's office. Your brother's in deep shit, she continued, without bothering with minor details. Identity theft, credit fraud, forgery if he signed your name anywhere. We're looking at potential felony charges. What are my options? Civil suit for $8,200 plus damages for time and emotional distress, or we go full nuclear and push for criminal charges. Both. If you're feeling ambitious, let's go nuclear. Filing took less than 2 hours. By lunchtime Dylan had received documents and a court date. My phone has exploded again. This time, it was Mom. Have you lost your mind? A lawsuit? How could you do this to your brother? He's devastated. Good, maybe next time he'll think twice before committing felonies. You're destroying this family. No, Mom. Dylan destroyed this family when he decided to steal from me. I'm just making it official. She hung up. For a week everything was quiet. There are no more charges on my cards. No more panic calls. I began to wonder if the legal realities had made him see logic. Then he arrived at my job place. I was up on a ladder running wiring through a ceiling when one of my guys said, "Hey Brody, someone is here to see you." I came down to find Dylan standing next to my truck, holding his phone as if it carried the world's most important message. He seems relaxed. Humble even. I wanted to apologize, he explained. I know I screwed up. I know you're pissed. I've been thinking about ways to make this right. This threw me off. This wasn't the Dylan I knew. The one who approached every confrontation as if he were a victim of circumstances beyond his control. I can't afford a lawyer, he explained. I was hoping we could work something out. I'll get a job, set up payments, whatever you need. And this is where I became stupid. A part of me wanted to believe him. Perhaps it was wishful thinking. Maybe I just wanted to believe that losing his toy truck had finally shocked him awake. Can we talk? Just 10 minutes. I don't want this to go to court. So I told my staff to have lunch and walked with him to a neighboring diner. For 30 minutes, he was the brother I wished he could be. He apologized without making excuses. He recognized that what he'd done was wrong. He even showed me his phone, which contained 3 job applications submitted that morning. "I know I've been a shitty brother," stated the younger gentleman. "I know I've taken advantage, I want to change that." After he departed, I sat in the diner booth, thinking about dropping the accusations. Perhaps this was really unusual. Perhaps losing his dream truck accomplished what years of lectures could not. Then my phone vibrated. Reject the transaction. $3,200 at Argosy Casino Riverside. My heart sank into my work boots. The charge was from the same credit card he'd used for the truck, which I'd forgotten to deactivate because I assumed the fraud alert would cover it. While I was still staring at the refuse notification, another text message arrived from him. "Guess your credit's screwed now too. Maybe next time, don't be such a dick to family." I screenshotted everything and forwarded it to Rachel. Then I phoned the police. The Kansas City Police Department did not mess around. They arrested Dylan the next morning on charges of identity theft, attempted fraud, and violating a restraining order. It appears that simply showing up at my employment site was sufficient. 5 days in county jail. Not long enough to write a memoir, but enough time to reflect on his decisions. Rachel also got me a protective order. Dylan was legally prohibited from contacting me, visiting my house, showing up at job sites, or generally living in the same zip code as me. That's when my folks revealed their true colors. The voicemails began instantly. "You've gone too far. He's your brother. This is not how we raised you. Do you want him to have a criminal record? How will that help anyone?" You'll notice they didn't ask how I was. They didn't check to see if I was okay after being robbed and threatened by my own brother. Nope. It was all about poor Dylan and how nasty I had been. Caleb contacted me after speaking with our Aunt Sarah. "Your parents are telling everyone you overreacted and that Dylan was just borrowing the money. Borrowing without asking is called stealing." "Yeah, well, they're not seeing it that way. They're painting you as the villain who destroyed the family over money." 2 weeks later, I was back in court. Rachel presented everything as if she were giving a tutorial on how to destroy someone who thought they were untouchable. The truck purchase, the casino attempt, the texts, and his complete lack of guilt. Dylan arrived this time with a public defender who appeared disinterested in being there. The judge was having none of it. $8,200 in restitution plus $5,000 for emotional distress and court costs. $13,200 total, plus probation and mandatory financial counseling. "Your Honor," Dylan's lawyer explained, "my client is unemployed and has no assets." "Then he'd better find some," the judge said. "Garnishment order approved. Any future income, tax returns or assets will be seized until this judgment is satisfied." Dylan's face turned white. Rachel tilted her head and said, "That judgment follows him forever. Credit destroyed, background checks flagged. Can't get decent employment, the consequences will outlast your anger by decades." That was all right with me. I wasn't doing it for money anymore. I was in it for the concept. But we weren't finished. Not even close. Dad texted me. "Dylan is in serious trouble. We need to talk." I disregarded it. He called an hour later. I let it ring. The voicemail began with the normal guilt trip, but then he said something that compelled me to listen. "He owes some very dangerous people money, Charles. I'm not exaggerating." I called Caleb to see if he'd heard anything. He had. "Your brother's been gambling hard. Online poker, sports betting, even driving to the casinos in Riverside and North Kansas City. Apparently he owes some loan shark in Independence about 15 grand. That's when the true story came out. Dylan hadn't only been financially reckless. He had been living in a whole dream world. The vehicle was supposed to be part of an image-building campaign. He believed that if he appeared successful, he could recruit investors for his social media empire. Instead of investors, he drew predatory lenders, casino hosts from Argosy and Ameristar, and guys who crushed kneecaps for money. My folks knew, they had known for months. While they were lecturing me on family devotion, they were covering his gambling bills and attempting to repair him behind the scenes. The cherry on top, they'd taken out a second mortgage to repay the loan shark. $25,000 was put against the house, which they had owned free and clear for 15 years. "They want you to drop the lawsuit," Caleb explained. "They think if Dylan doesn't have a criminal record, he can get a better job and pay everyone back." I laughed. "They mortgaged their house for a gambling addict, and they want me to make it easier for him. Screw that, and screw them." But Caleb wasn't finished. "There's more. Remember Dylan's ex-roommate Brandon? The one who moved out like 6 months ago?" "Yeah, what about him?" "I ran into him at Home Depot yesterday. He's still pissed about Dylan owing him money. Apparently it wasn't just the security deposit Dylan never returned. According to Brandon, Dylan borrowed $1,200 for emergency car repairs that never happened. Instead, Dylan used it for some cryptocurrency investment that went belly up in 3 days. When Brandon demanded his money back, Dylan fed him a story about waiting for an insurance settlement that was completely fictitious. That same week, Caleb heard from Mrs. Harris, our elderly neighbor who had always been kind to Dylan. It turns out he borrowed $800 from her for job training courses that would help him find a better job. The courses were real. They only cost $50, not $800. Dylan pocketed the difference. She is humiliated. Caleb stated that she does not want to cause difficulty, but she is on a fixed income, and the money was very important to her. The big reveal came from Caleb's girlfriend, who worked at the bank where my parents banked. She was unable to provide specifics due to privacy rules. But she mentioned that my folks had been there a lot recently. Loan applications, second mortgage papers, and many cash withdrawals. He said my father appeared to have aged 10 years. That's when everything clicked. My parents were desperate for me to help Dylan. So insistent that families stick together. He's so willing to excuse his behavior. They had been funding his disaster for months and were running out of funds. The next family gathering was for my cousin Sophie's wedding shower. I didn't want to go, but Caleb persuaded me. You'll regret missing it, and maybe we'll learn more about what's going on. My parents were present, looking uncomfortable and muttering to relatives in the corners. I overheard Mom talking to my aunt about difficult times, and Dad saying something about temporary financial setbacks. During the gift opening, I noticed my parents handed Sophie a $25 Target gift card. These were the people who used to offer $200 cash gifts at weddings. The same people who had recently obtained a second mortgage to cover their son's gambling bills. After the shower, Caleb and I were carrying presents into our cars when Brandon arrived. He was apparently dating one of Sophie's friends and had received an invitation. Brody. Hey man, I heard about the truck thing. That's so fucked up. Yeah. Well, Dylan is going to be Dylan. Did you know he's been telling people you stole his truck? Like, he's actually trying to play the victim in this whole thing. That surprised me. What's he saying? That you got jealous of his success and used your connections to have his truck repossessed. Says you're trying to sabotage his business because you can't stand seeing him do well. Brandon also revealed that Dylan had sought to borrow more money from him just 2 weeks ago. Additional $500 for business equipment. When Brandon reminded him of the $1,200 he's still owing, Dylan like it was ancient history. The balls of this guy. Absolutely fantastic. 2 days after the wedding shower, Mom called me. Not your typical guilt trip call, but something unusual. She sounded exhausted. Defeated. Charles, I need to tell you something about Dylan. About all of it. I'm listening. A long pause. Can you come over? I don't want to do this on the phone. I nearly said no. Part of me thought this was simply another manipulative ploy, another attempt to convince me to withdraw the charges. But something about her voice stopped me. I drove to their place that evening. Dad was noticeably absent. Working late, Mom said. But I felt Dad couldn't face the topic. We sat at the kitchen table, where I had done homework as a child. Mom had made coffee, but neither of us tried it. I don't know where to start, she said. How about with the truth? She drew a hesitant breath. Dylan has been using our credit cards for months. We didn't know at first. The bills would come and there would be charges we didn't recognize. But Dylan always had explanations. What kind of explanations? He said he was buying equipment for his business or that he'd used our card because his was maxed out, but he was going to pay us back when his contracts came through. Contracts that never existed. The business that never existed. How much, Mom? $28,000. I felt my stomach drop. $28,000. No wonder they were so desperate for me to assist him. I'm so worried about him having a criminal record. We kept thinking the next payment would cover everything, she told me. He kept showing us these apps on his phone, these websites about cryptocurrency and online marketing. He made it sound so legitimate. And you believed him? I wanted to believe him. Your father wanted to believe him. We kept thinking this was finally it, his big break. The worst part, Dylan was forging their signatures on credit card applications. 3 separate cards, each maxed out within months. When their payments grew unmanageable, he persuaded them to take out a second mortgage. He stated that the business was going to take off. That we'd be able to repay everything within 6 months. He had these charts, the projections. The mortgage payment is $380 per month. Mom answered gently. We'll be paying it until your father is 75. I sat there, contemplating this knowledge. My parents, who had paid off their house early, never had credit card debt, and had saved wisely their entire lives, had been financially devastated by their own son. Why didn't you tell me? We were embarrassed and scared. Dylan kept saying he was about to turn everything around. Mom, he's never turned anything around, ever, in his entire life. I know that now. We sat silently for a few minutes. Finally, I asked the question that I wasn't sure I wanted the answer to. What happens now? I don't know. Your father thinks we should sell the house, downsize to an apartment, use whatever equity is left to pay off the credit cards. And Dylan doesn't get to come back, ever. I told him yesterday. It astonished me. Despite their enabling, my parents had now reached their limit. She began to cry then, out of true anguish for the son she had lost and the life they had made that was now gone. I keep thinking about what we did wrong, where we went wrong. Maybe if we'd been stricter when he was younger. Dylan is 26, he made adult choices. This isn't your fault. I intended it. My parents were victims as well as enablers. They had been duped and lied to by someone they absolutely trusted. Before I departed that night, Mom asked me one more thing. Do you think he'll ever get better? Do you think he'll ever change? I thought about it for a bit. Not until he faces real consequences. The federal case was solid. There's too much evidence. There are too many victims. There were too many lies that were easily disproven. When the prosecutor detailed Dylan's schemes, the truck fraud, the casino attempts, the credit card theft from our parents, and the money he stole from Brandon and Mrs. Harris, it formed a picture of someone who had been scamming everyone in his life for more than a year. Dylan attempted to plea bargain. The feds offered 18 months if he made full compensation to everyone. The problem was that he owed around $42,000 total to all victims and had a negative net worth. My parents had already depleted their savings trying to cover his gambling bills. They had taken out a second mortgage for $25,000, but still couldn't pay off everything he owed. The trial lasted 3 days. On day 2, I testified about everything, from the truck purchase to the casino efforts. Dylan received 2 years in federal jail, 3 years probation, and full restitution for everyone he defrauded. My parents lost their home 6 months later, having to sell it to pay off the second mortgage and cover what they could of Dylan debt. They are currently renting a 2-bedroom flat in Raytown. But here's the thing with consequences. They don't end when the gavel falls. When Dylan was released after 18 months in prison, he discovered what life is like for a federal felon. Background checks are performed on all employment applications. Credit reports indicated multiple fraud convictions. Landlords who refused to rent to someone with his background. Caleb kept me informed via the family grapevine. Dylan was couch surfing, picking up cash-only day labor wherever he could find it, and being turned down for every serious job when they checked his past. The internet made matters worse. Every potential employer who investigated his name discovered the same information. Federal convictions for identity theft and fraud. He was unable to get a genuine job within 6 months after being released from prison. He couldn't rent an apartment without someone conducting a background check and rejecting his application. Even when he tried to use false references, a Google search of his name revealed the entire tale. He attempted migrating to many cities. It did not matter. Your criminal record follows you around, and his was very damaging. Last I heard, he was staying in a weekly hotel in Independence, surviving on odd jobs and food assistance. My parents contacted Caleb one last time. They wanted to know whether I'd consider helping Dylan get back on his feet now that he'd paid his debt to society. Caleb gave my response. That debt follows him forever. If they don't like it, they can move to Independence and help him personally. A year later, I received a wedding invitation through the mail. Not from family, but from Rachel, my lawyer. She was getting married to a prosecutor she met while working on Dylan's case. She pulled me away during the reception. You know, your brother's case made my reputation. I've gotten dozens of financial fraud clients since then. Happy to help. There's something else. Your brother was arrested again last month. Check fraud in Arkansas. It appears that certain things never change. I was not surprised. People like Dylan do not learn. They simply find new victims in different locations. But this time, it wasn't my problem. I drank my drink and drove home to my paid-off house in my paid-off truck, feeling good about my strong money account and clear conscience. Some bridges are designed to be burned, salted and nuked from orbit. Just to be sure. Dylan learned his lesson the hard way. My brother's girlfriend planted drugs in my room and framed me. I was arrested and kicked out by my own mother. I, a 21-year-old male, need to get this off my chest because my life has entirely fallen apart over the last month. My younger brother, Patrick, a 19-year-old male, has always been the golden kid in our family. But what he did to me was beyond what I could have anticipated. Let us first examine our family dynamics. Our parents split when I was 12 and Patrick was 10. Our father relocated across the nation for work, so we only see him on holidays. Our mother, Rosa, 45, works 2 jobs to support us. She works during the day as a nurse at the local hospital and at night as an office cleaner. She is usually fatigued, so Patrick and I had to rely on each other growing up. Our mother has always been really strict with both of us in terms of academic performance. She came here from Colombia when she was young and never finished college since she had me so early. She is always teaching us that education is the only way to make something of ourselves. Patrick has always been a naturally bright student who excels in her role. I had to work twice as hard to achieve good grades. Even then, I usually got B's and C's. As a result, Patrick became Mom's clear favorite. She would brag about him to her friends, display his report cards on the refrigerator, and always use him as an example when lecturing me on my grades. It ached. But I understood. Patrick was actually clever, and his mother was proud. I assumed that was just the way things were. Despite this preference, Patrick and I were actually quite close. We shared a room until I was 18. And we had an underlying agreement that we were a team against the world. When Mom was working late, we'd order pizza and stay up late playing video games. When she was concerned about money, we would both contribute from our part-time jobs without her asking. Patrick would assist me with my homework, and I would drive him around because he didn't have a license yet. The situation started approximately 6 months ago, when Patrick began seeing Linda, an 18-year-old girl from his high school. She's one of those popular attractive girls who is accustomed to receiving attention. Patrick was utterly smitten with her from the beginning. He'd spend hours on the phone with her, skip our regular hangouts, and basically base his entire schedule on her availability. I did not mind at first. Patrick had never had a significant girlfriend before, so I assumed he was just going through the honeymoon phase. But Linda started visiting our house more frequently, and I began to notice some things about her that disturbed me. She had a habit of talking down to those she thought were beneath her. She'd make passing remarks about how small our house was, or how weary Mom always looked. She would roll her eyes when her mother tried to converse with her in broken English. Patrick never seemed to notice these details, or perhaps he decided to overlook them. The true problem occurred when Linda started spending time at our house when Patrick was at work. He worked at the local grocery shop 3 afternoons a week, and she would occasionally pop up while just I was home. She used to wait in Patrick's room, but she eventually started hanging out with me in the living room. Linda is gorgeous, and she was well aware of this. She wore low-cut blouses and short shorts and sat very close to me on the couch while we watched TV. She would laugh at everything I said, even when I wasn't attempting to be amusing. She'd stroke my arm while she spoke to me and grumble about Patrick's constant work or school commitments. I was aware of what was happening, but I attempted to maintain my distance. Patrick was my brother, and I wasn't about to jeopardize that for any female, no matter how lovely she was. But Linda persisted. She started texting me to see whether I was home before she came over. She would bring me food from the areas she visited with Patrick. She'd asked me for advice on their relationship, which seemed like a trap. The breaking point happened roughly 2 months ago. Patrick was working a double shift at the store, and Linda arrived at our home at 8 p.m. Mom was working a night job, so it was just me and her. She mentioned that she was bored and wanted to hang out. We ended up watching a movie, and she kept moving closer to me on the couch. Near the end of the film, she asked me directly if I considered her beautiful. I told her she was beautiful, but she was my brother's girlfriend, and I was not interested in going down that road. She laughed and said Patrick did not need to know everything. She then kissed me. I pulled her away instantly and urged her to leave. She became agitated and claimed I was rejecting her because I thought I was too good for her. I said it had nothing to do with that. I wasn't going to betray my brother. She departed angrily, and I hoped that was the end of the matter. But Linda began acting strangely around me after that. When she came over with Patrick, she barely noticed me. She'd mutter things to Patrick, which made him look at me oddly. She began posting cryptic messages on social media about people not being who they appear, and how some people cannot be trusted. Patrick started treating me differently too. He stopped inviting me to hang out. When I tried to converse to him, he just gave me short answers. When I asked him what was wrong, he didn't say anything, but I could tell he was upset. 3 weeks ago, everything detonated. I was at my part-time work at the auto shop when my phone began to ring with calls and texts. My mother was anxiously contacting me and Patrick had sent me several nasty texts. Mom texted me that I needed to get home immediately since the cops were at our house. I went home as quickly as possible, and when I came into our house, there were 2 police cars parked outside. My mother was crying on the front porch and Patrick stood next to her, arms crossed. The officers were walking out of our house with many plastic bags. One of the officers approached me and asked for my identification. He informed me that they had gotten an anonymous tip that I was selling drugs from our home, and that they had discovered marijuana and prescription pills in my bedroom. I was extremely shocked. I told them I had no idea how those narcotics got there, but they insisted on taking me in for interrogation. At the police station, they informed me that someone had called in a tip alleging that they had purchased drugs from me several times. The caller gave specifics about our house layout and that I kept my stockpile in a shoebox under my bed. When they checked the specific spot, they discovered a bag of marijuana and approximately 20 tablets, which turned out to be stolen prescription medications. I kept saying that I'd never seen those medicines before in my life. I don't even smoke marijuana. I've always been concerned that it might jeopardize my ability to keep my job at the auto shop. But the proof was right where the anonymous caller claimed it would be. The worst part was that my mother and Patrick came to pick me up after I was freed on bond. Mom would not look at me. Patrick sat in the back car, staring out the window the entire way home. When we went to the house, Mom told me I had 24 hours to find another somewhere to live. I tried to explain to both of them that I was innocent, but Mom said the narcotics were discovered in my room, which was sufficient for her. Patrick only shook his head and expressed his disappointment in me for lying about it. He stated Linda had warned him that I had been acting strangely lately and that she feared I was doing drugs. That's when something clicked. Linda had been in our home alone several times. She knew the arrangement. She had access to my room and was now easily commenting on my odd conduct. I confronted Patrick about Linda, and he became enraged. He claimed I was attempting to blame his girlfriend for my own mistakes. He said Linda had been nothing but kind to me, and that I was ungrateful. Mom agreed with him, saying I was manipulative by attempting to shift blame to an innocent girl. I packed my belongings and left that night. I've been staying at my friend Gavin's apartment and sleeping on his couch. The criminal accusations remain unresolved, and I had to utilize my money to hire a lawyer. My mother hasn't returned my calls, and Patrick has blocked me on all social media. It pains me that I can't prove Linda planted the medicines. I can't verify she made the anonymous call. I only had my suspicions and the fact that she had access to my room. But Patrick is so consumed by his affections for her that he refuses to even contemplate the prospect. I learned from Gavin, who still speaks with Patrick on occasion, that Linda has moved on to console Patrick about having such a disappointing brother. She's been staying at our house more frequently, assisting Mom with domestic duties, and generally presenting herself as the ideal girlfriend who is supporting the family during this tough time. Meanwhile, my life is utterly shattered. I might go to jail. I have lost my family. My reputation in our small community has been shattered. And the guy I believe is to blame for everything is being honored as if he were a saint. I do not know what to do. Part of me wants to keep battling to establish my innocence, but another part of me believes I should give up and start over somewhere else. Have you ever been in a situation where someone close to you was exploited by a toxic individual? How can you prove something if you don't have any evidence? Update 1. I can't believe I'm back with an update, but something happened to change everything. For those who haven't read my initial story, Linda, my brother Patrick's girlfriend, basically destroyed my life by hiding narcotics in my room and called the police with an anonymous tip. I've been staying on my friend Gavin's couch since my mother kicked me out. The last 3 weeks have been horrible. My lawyer stated the case against me is solid because the pills were discovered exactly where the anonymous caller predicted they would be. The prosecutor has offered me a plea agreement. Admit guilt and receive probation instead of probable jail time. My lawyer recommended me to accept it, but I refused because I am innocent. Gavin has been kind about allowing me to stay with him, but I could tell it was straining his relationship with his girlfriend, Jenna. They'd have these whispered discussions in the kitchen that would end when I walked in. Jenna ultimately told me last week that I could stay for no more than 2 weeks since they needed their space back. I understood. But that meant I was running out of options quickly. I began looking for apartments that I could afford with my auto shop wages, but most places required the first month, last month, and a security deposit up front. With my legal bills, I barely had enough to cover 1 month's rent, let alone 3. I actually considered packing my car and driving to another state to start fresh. However, something unexpected occurred. Last Tuesday, I was working late at the car business when my phone called. I didn't recognize the number, yet something compelled me to answer it. Linda's voice came through on the other end. She sounded different, unsteady and frightened. She asked if we could meet somewhere and speak. I told her I had nothing to say to her, especially after she convinced my brother and mother that I was a drug dealer. She said she needed to tell me something crucial about what had happened. My first instinct was to hang up, but curiosity got the best of me. I promised to meet her in a 24-hour diner across town where no one would recognize us. She said she will be there in an hour. When I arrived at the diner, Linda was already seated in a rear booth with a cup of coffee she hadn't touched. She looked awful. Her hair was a disaster. She had black circles under her eyes and her hands were trembling. This was not the confident, manipulative girl I recall. She began talking before I even sat down. She explained that Patrick had proposed to her the night before. He didn't just propose. He devised an elaborate plan to propose at graduation in front of both families. He had spent all of his savings on a ring and was discussing moving in together after high school. Linda claimed she panicked when he proposed. She realized she didn't want to marry Patrick and live in our small town. She had only been dating him because he was intelligent, and she thought it made her appear attractive. But the thought of being bound to him indefinitely scared her. She then began crying and stated that she needed to tell me the truth about what had transpired. She admits to planting the narcotics in my room. She claimed she stole them from her mother's medication cabinet and acquired the marijuana from a student at school. She placed the anonymous call to the police because she wanted me out of the situation. I questioned her why she would go to such extremes to get rid of me. She claimed it wasn't actually about me at all. She understood that if Patrick's family came apart, he'd have to prioritize taking care of his mother before planning their future together. She reasoned that if I was arrested and booted out, it would cause enough family upheaval to keep Patrick from considering marriage. She also admitted lying to Patrick about my coming on to her. She claimed she told him I had tried to kiss her and that I was constantly making indecent comments when he was not present. She wanted him to distrust me so that when the drug incident occurred, he would not question it. I sat there in full disbelief as I heard this revelation. This girl had ruined my life as part of a grand scheme to avoid marrying my brother. I inquired why she was telling me this now. She claimed Patrick had been talking about the wedding non-stop since he proposed, and the guilt was eating her alive. She also stated that her mother had spotted the missing pills and threatened to contact the police if Linda did not admit to taking them. She was afraid she'd get arrested herself. I asked her whether she was willing to tell the truth to Patrick and my mother. She said she would, but she expected something in exchange. She wanted me to assist convince Patrick not to hate her when the truth was revealed. She said she genuinely cared about him and didn't want him to believe she was a monster. I almost laughed at her plea. She had literally tried to put me in prison, ruined my connection with my family, and cost me thousands of dollars in legal bills. And now she wants me to help her deal with her breakup with my brother. But then I realized, this was my chance to reclaim my life. I promised her I'd think about helping her work things out with Patrick. But first, she had to go to the police and admit to planting the pills. I also wanted her to tell my mother and Patrick the truth in person, not over the phone. She offered to meet me at the police station the next day. I didn't trust her, so I insisted on picking her up myself to ensure she showed up. The following morning, I traveled to Linda's residence. She was waiting outside with a small luggage, and she appeared to have not slept all night. On the way to the police station, she kept asking me what I expected Patrick to do when he found out. I told her honestly that he would probably never forgive her, but that was the result of her actions. Linda went to the police station and wanted to speak with the investigator who had handled my case. She confessed to planting the narcotics and filing a fraudulent report. The detective asked her to write and sign a thorough statement. He said the charges against me will be dropped within a few days. Linda asked if we might meet with my mother and Patrick after we left the police station. I contacted my mother and informed her that I was coming over with Linda and that she needed to hear something important. Mom seemed perplexed, but decided to let us come over. When we arrived at my house, Patrick and Mom were both sitting at the kitchen table waiting for us. Patrick seemed angry to see me, and Mom appeared fatigued. Linda sat across from them and explained everything. The drugs, the anonymous call, and the lies about my sexual advances on her. All of it. Patrick's face went through around 5 different emotions as Linda spoke. First came confusion, then amazement, rage, hurt, and ultimately a blank expression as if he was shutting down. Mom merely kept shaking her head and saying, "I can't believe it." Patrick asked Linda why she would do such a terrible thing to his family once she had finished talking. She tried to explain that she felt stuck and didn't want to marry, but he cut her off. He told her to go and not contact him again. After Linda had departed, Mom hugged me and apologized for not believing me. She claimed she felt bad about kicking me out and that I could move back home immediately. Patrick apologized too, but I could tell he was more upset with himself for being duped than sorry for doubting me. I returned home that weekend. The accusations were officially dismissed, and my lawyer indicated that I might be able to collect part of my legal bills from Linda's family. Patrick had definitely broken up with Linda, and he buried himself in his schoolwork to avoid dealing with his emotions. But, here's the deal. Even if the truth has been revealed and my name has been cleared, things are not back to normal. Patrick seldom speaks to me, he seems cordial but aloof, as if he is embarrassed by the entire event. Mom tries to pretend as if everything is fine, but there is an uneasiness between us that was not present before. I believe Patrick feels dumb for being duped by Linda, and seeing me reminds him of how terribly he misread the situation. I also believe he is processing the idea that his girlfriend was willing to destroy his family in order to avoid marrying him, which must have been quite damaging to his self-esteem. Linda has obviously left town. Patrick learned from someone at school that she had moved in with relatives in another state. I hope I never see her again, but a part of me wonders whether she may try to cause more difficulties in the future. For the time being, all I'm focusing on is rebuilding my life and ties with family. It will take time, but at least the truth is now out there. Update 2. Another update because the matter has somehow become much more convoluted. Linda, my brother's ex-girlfriend, falsely accused me of drug peddling. I was arrested. My family has disowned me. She eventually admitted the truth. I assumed that was the end of it, but I was mistaken. Things were slowly returning to normal at home. Patrick was still acting strangely around me, but Mom and I were repairing our connection. After being home for approximately a month, something happened that changed everything again. On a Saturday morning I was working at the auto shop when an elderly woman came in and specifically asked for me. She introduced herself as Olivia, Linda's mother. I'd never met her before, but I knew her from the images Linda had given us. Olivia seemed quite unhappy and requested if we could speak privately. My supervisor allowed me to take a break and we sat in her car outside the business. She informed me that Linda had been lying about far more than simply the pills. Olivia claims Linda had been stealing from her for months before the event with me occurred. Olivia's purse money, prescriptions, and even some of her jewelry had gone missing. Olivia suspected Linda but couldn't prove it until Linda admitted to the police that she had framed me. However, that wasn't the worst part. Olivia claimed that once Linda moved up with her relatives in Nevada, she began phoning Olivia wanting money. Linda claimed she was pregnant with Patrick's baby and required financial assistance. Olivia sent her $2,000 before becoming suspicious and contacting the relatives Linda was allegedly residing with. Linda had never been pregnant. She had been spending the money on parties with new acquaintances in Las Vegas. When Olivia confronted her about it, Linda admitted the pregnancy was bogus but claimed she deserved the money as restitution for having to leave her community due to the mess I had caused. Olivia called because she thought I should know Linda was continuing lying about our family and attempting to obtain money by using Patrick's name. She also wanted to tell me that Linda had been posting messages on social media about how she was the true victim in our scenario. I checked Linda's social media profiles that night, and Olivia was correct. Linda had rewritten the entire narrative online. According to her writings, I had been bothering her for months, making unwelcome advances and threatening her when she turned me down. She stated she only lied to the police because she was afraid of what I would do to her. She presented herself as a valiant victim who had finally escaped an oppressive situation. The post received dozens of comments from people I didn't know, calling me various names and suggesting I should be imprisoned. Linda also shared images of herself looking sad and vulnerable, with words about starting afresh after overcoming tragedy. I screenshotted everything and showed it to Patrick. He was furious when he realized what Linda had posted. He hadn't used social media since their breakup, so he had no idea she was still spreading lies about our family. Patrick decided to phone Linda and tell her about the bogus pregnancy narrative and social media posts. I was present when he made the call, and he turned it on speaker so that I could hear. Linda answered the first ring, and her voice became beautiful and heartfelt when she learned it was Patrick. She informed him she had been missing him tremendously and regretted leaving town. She expressed a desire to return and resolve their differences. Patrick interrupted her and asked about the pregnancy claim and the money she had taken from her mother. Linda became defensive, claiming Olivia was lying because she was furious about Linda moving out. She insisted the pregnancy was real, but she miscarried soon after moving to Nevada. Then Patrick questioned her about the social media posts. Linda's tone abruptly shifted. She became hostile and claimed she had every right to explain her side of the tale. She claimed I had made her feel unsafe, and she was simply alerting other girls about my actions. Patrick informed her she was delusional, and that he did not want to hear from her again. Linda began crying and begged him not to hang up. She promised to stop blogging about me if he would talk to her about getting back together. Patrick informed her that she was unwell and hung up, but the harm had already been done. Linda's social media posts were shared by people in our town, and the story spread. I began receiving strange looks at work and throughout town from folks who believed Linda's version of events. My employer at the car shop summoned me to his office the following week. He stated some customers had inquired about me, and he was concerned about the shop's reputation. He did not fire me, but he made it obvious that if the drama continued to disrupt his business, he would have to let me go. That's when I knew I couldn't keep ignoring Linda's falsehoods. I had remained silent when she first confessed because I believed the truth would be sufficient, but she was still out there attempting to harm my reputation. I gathered all of my proof, including screenshots of her tweets, the police report in which she confessed, Olivia's testimony regarding the stolen money and fake pregnancy, and I made my own social media reaction describing what truly happened. I did not insult Linda personally or call her names, I simply presented the facts with documentation to back them up. I said that she admitted to placing narcotics in my room, lied to the police, and was now spreading false information online. The response was quick. People who knew me and my family began to share my post and defend me in the comments. Linda's school friends came up with their own stories of how she lied or manipulated circumstances to gain attention. Linda, however, took things to the next level. She created a new social media account and began messaging my friends and co-workers directly, sending them bogus images of text conversations in which I allegedly threatened her. The screenshots were clearly doctored. They had uneven formatting, and several of the messages used lingo that I never use. Linda's false screenshot was emailed to my mother's office. A coworker showed it to Mom, who brought it home and asked me about it. According to the phony message, I threatened Linda with violence if she returned to town. I demonstrated to Mom how the screenshot was a forgery by comparing it to real text chats on my phone. The fonts were different, and the message timestamps did not correspond with when Linda and I had actually texted. Mom believed me, but she was concerned about how far Linda was ready to go with her falsehoods. Patrick suggested we talk to a lawyer regarding Linda's harassment accusations. He felt guilty that his ex-girlfriend was still attempting to harm our family, even after the truth was revealed. Last week we spoke with a lawyer who specializes in internet harassment claims. She analyzed all of the data, and concluded that we had a strong case against Linda for defamation and cyberstalking. She further stated that Olivia may file charges for theft and fraud in connection with the phony pregnancy money. Linda received a cease and desist letter from the lawyer, requesting that she stop posting false material about me and remove all existing posts. Linda has yet to answer, although her social media profiles were made private shortly after she would have received the message. I'm hoping that this is the end of Linda's crusade against me, but I'm not holding my breath. She appears determined to present herself as the victim, regardless of the evidence to the contrary. The good news is that Patrick and I can finally talk regularly again. Working together to deal with Linda's harassment has helped us rebuild our relationship. He apologized for ever doubting me and said he felt silly for being duped by someone so manipulative. Mom has been fantastic during all of this. She feels bad about how she treated me when I was first arrested, and she has been going out of her way to make amends. She also offered to cover my legal bills in the harassment case. I'm simply tired of dealing with Linda's drama. All I want is for her to leave me and my family alone so that we can get on with our lives, but it seems like every time I think it's finished, she finds another way to cause trouble. Update 3. This is my final update because I believe the situation has reached a resolution. Linda, my brother's ex-girlfriend, falsely accused me of drug peddling. I got arrested. My family has disowned me. She eventually confessed. And then she kept bothering me online with false stories. We retained a lawyer and gave her a cease and desist letter. The cease and desist letter was effective, but not in the way we planned. Instead of just ceasing her pestering, Linda decided to push matters one last time before vanishing totally from our life. Olivia, Linda's mother, called me back about 2 weeks after the lawyer submitted the letter. She sounded worried, saying Linda had returned to our town without informing anyone. Olivia discovered out when Linda's relatives in Nevada contacted looking for her. She had allegedly stolen money and items from them before departing. Olivia was concerned about Linda's potential actions, as she appeared to be becoming increasingly desperate and reckless. She warned me to be cautious and said she was heading to our town to attempt to locate Linda and bring her home. That day, Patrick called me at work. He seemed shaken and informed me Linda had popped up on his college campus. She had managed to figure out his class schedule and was waiting for him outside his chemistry lecture. When he attempted to ignore her and go away, she began ranting at him in front of the other pupils. Linda was complaining to Patrick about how I had turned everyone against her and ruined her life. She blamed me for her family cutting her off, forcing her to leave town, and preventing her from returning. She insisted that Patrick chose between supporting her and supporting me. Patrick said he would never select her after what she had done to her family. Linda took out her phone and began recording, claiming loudly that Patrick was harassing her and that she felt unsafe. Other students gathered around to see what was going on. Linda was eventually escorted off campus by security. They told Patrick that he could make a report if he wanted, but he declined because all he wanted was for her to leave him alone. But Linda wasn't finished. That evening she shared the video she had taken on social media, claiming Patrick was part of a plan with me to silence her. The video was modified to remove the context for what she was ranting about. So it just showed Patrick appearing irritated and begging her to leave him alone. This was Linda's biggest error yet. Several kids who observed the actual fight read the post and left comments detailing what transpired. They depicted Linda as the aggressor, ranting about how I had ruined her life. One student even had their own video of the incident from a different perspective, demonstrating Linda's strange conduct. When this video was shared, it entirely contradicted Linda's story and made her appear unstable. That night, Olivia discovered Linda in a small motel on the outskirts of town. Linda had been using bogus social media accounts to watch what was said about her, and she was outraged that her plan to make Patrick appear bad had failed. Olivia persuaded Linda to meet with our lawyer to discuss resolving the matter without taking further legal action. I was suspicious, but the lawyer thought it was worth investigating because Linda was definitely spiraling and might agree to terms that would stop this forever. The meeting was held a few days later in the lawyer's office. Linda looked dreadful. She had lost weight, her hair was greasy, and she was always fidgeting with her hands. Olivia sat next to her and did the majority of the talking at first. Our lawyer presented Linda with two possibilities. She could agree to sign a legally enforceable agreement, agreeing to never contact me, Patrick, or anybody in our family again, as well as to delete all false posts about me on social media. In exchange, we agreed not to seek criminal charges for her recent harassment. If she refused, we would file charges for cyberstalking, defamation, and harassment, while Olivia would seek charges for theft and fraud relating to the phony pregnancy money. Linda originally claimed that she was the true victim, and that we were bullying her. But when the lawyer showed her all of the evidence we had gathered, including the false screenshots, conflicting social media posts, and witness testimonies from Patrick campus incident, she suddenly realized how much danger she was in. Olivia cried for most of the meeting. She kept apologizing to us, claiming she didn't know how to help her kid anymore. She claimed Linda had been engaging in manipulative conduct since she was a teenager, but it had gotten considerably worse in the last year. After approximately an hour of conversation, Linda agreed to sign the contract. She would delete all of my social media posts, stop using fake identities to track or contact anyone in our family, and leave town forever. She also had to agree to receive mental health treatment, which Olivia insisted on. Linda was required by the lawyer to write and sign a public apology post, which she had to leave on her social media platforms for 30 days before deleting them. The apology acknowledged that she had lied about me, and that all of her earlier posts were fake. Linda was plainly ashamed by having to post an apology, yet she did so. The message drew a lot of interest from people in our town who were following the situation. Many people left comments expressing their support for me and my family. Olivia returned Linda to Nevada the same day. Olivia gave me her phone number and told me to call her if Linda contacted us again. She also volunteered to pay for some of my legal fees, which was thoughtful of her. That was 2 months ago, and I have not heard from Linda since. Her social media accounts have been erased, and Patrick claims none of his pals have seen or heard from her. I occasionally check to see whether she has formed new accounts to post about me, but so far everything has been silent. My life has mostly gone back to normal. I'm still working at the car business, and my boss seems relieved that the turmoil has ended. My relationship with Patrick is the best it's been in years. Going through this experience together drew us closer. Mom has also been great. She still feels horrible about how she treated me when I was first arrested, but we've moved on. This event taught her a lesson about online abuse, and she is now more skeptical of everything she sees on social media. The only long-term effect is that I'm much more cautious about who I trust. Linda taught me that some people are willing to wreck innocent people's lives for just selfish reasons. I'm not bitter about it, but I'm more conscious of warning signs in people's conduct. I've also realized that sometimes the truth isn't enough. Even after Linda admitted to framing me, she continued to influence others online with false stories. It took legal action and enough evidence to eventually stop her. Patrick is currently dating a new girl named Lily, who appears to be truly kind and drama-free. He's taking it much slower this time and is being more cautious in introducing her to the family. I believe his experience with Linda taught him to look for character and integrity rather than being impressed by someone's appearance or popularity. Linda, on the other hand, I hope she receives the assistance she requires and ceases to cause harm. But I also want to never have to deal with her again. Some individuals are simply poisonous, and the best thing you can do is remove them from your life and keep them away. I'm thankful that my family stayed together in the end and that the truth came out. It was a horrific experience, but it might have been much worse if Linda had been more cautious about covering her tracks, or if my family had refused to listen when the evidence became evident. This entire incident taught me that while family relationships can be fragile, they can also be stronger than you realize if everyone is prepared to fight for them. Patrick and I went through hell, but we emerged stronger on the other side. My daughter, lied once, I believed her and kicked my son out. 2 years later, she needs his kidney, but he refuses to save her. I never imagined I'd write something like this, or that I'd be sitting here alone, my hands shaking, revisiting every decision I made that night, every word I screamed, and every quiet I chose to maintain. I was 38, and my spouse was 39. We had 2 children, Adrian, 18, and Isabella, 9. Despite the significant age disparity, I always assumed they loved each other, looked after each other, and were close siblings. Adrian was quiet and reserved. He enjoyed reading, staying in his room, and studying. Yet he was a good lad. He never responded to me, never caused difficulty, and never gave me any reason to distrust him. Isabella was the complete opposite, cheerful, active, a whirlwind, constantly moving and talking. And because I worked part-time and my husband spent long hours away, Adrian frequently looked after her. He would return home from college and be with her until I arrived. There were no indicators. Until that night, it was a family meal. We'd prepared spaghetti. My sister-in-law provided the wine. My nephews were playing in the living room. My husband, my children and I were all at the table, along with a couple of cousins. Nothing unusual, nothing out of the ordinary. And then Isabella spoke it plainly, without drama or tears, like if the neighbor's dog had bitten her. "Adrian touched me down there," she said simply and coldly, as if she didn't realize the gravity of the situation. Everything ceased. My cousin quit speaking. My spouse stared at me. I gazed at my kid. "What did you say, my love?" I asked softly, trying not to shake. My brother touched my private parts twice. I coughed on my own breath. Nobody said anything for a few seconds. Then my hubby got up. His chair tipped backward. I followed him as if my legs were moving themselves. I called Adrian. He didn't respond. I called again. This time he picked up. "What's wrong, Mom? Come home now." "What happened?" "Just come home." He got off the line. It took him 20 minutes to arrive. He stepped in with his knapsack on his shoulder, perplexed. "What happened?" Before he could respond, my husband pushed him hard against the wall. "Did you touch her? Did you touch your sister?" "What? What are you talking about?" Adrian couldn't grasp. I swear it. I could see it on his face. He was pale, terrified, stammering and shaking his head. "No, of course not. I would never do that. I don't know why she's saying that." But my husband wouldn't let him go on. He punched him in the face. Adrian collapsed to the floor, bleeding from his nose, and looked up at us with a mixture of terror, amazement, and something more. Something I'd never seen before in him. Betrayal. I did nothing. I simply gazed at him. I did not hug him. I did not defend him. I did not believe him. My husband went to his room and got his backpack, clothes, and paperwork. He went outside, flung everything on the doorstep and screamed, "You're dead to us, never come back." Adrian was crying, practically begging. He said he didn't comprehend and it wasn't true. "Please don't kick me out." And I simply stood there clutching Isabella. No word, not a single one. We excluded him from everything. We changed the locks and canceled his college support. He never returned to that house or made another call. He ceased to exist for us. We spent weeks convincing ourselves that we had done the right thing by sheltering our baby. We questioned her multiple times if there was anything more that had happened. She only said no twice. And we never took her to a psychologist because we thought our love was enough, and we blindly believed her. For a while, it appeared that peace was returning. Isabella played, smiled, and slept better. I started sleeping too, until the dreams started. I would see Adrian on the floor, his face bleeding, his eyes wide, gazing at me, his mother, and asking, why? Because I didn't inquire, I didn't doubt, I simply acted. That was the night I completely destroyed him. Months have passed since we kicked Adrian out. Months of silence, denial, and thinking we'd done the right thing. Isabella smiled again, playing. She even mentioned that she felt safer today. I viewed that as a sign that we had acted appropriately. My husband never brought up Adrian's name again. Whether I indicated that I missed him or inquired whether we knew anything about him, his expression would freeze me from the inside. Adrian didn't exist for him anymore. Until that Saturday, Isabella was on her way to art class. An elder cousin was driving her. It was a calm afternoon. I was folding laundry when the phone rang. I don't recall much of the call. Only a few words remain in my ear. Accident, head-on collision, ambulance, 1 person killed. The girl is in critical condition. My husband followed me as I hurried to the hospital. We arrived as she was being brought to the ER. There was blood, there were shrieks. Doctors were scurrying everywhere. I saw her pale, unconscious little face covered in tubes. For a little moment, the world fell silent again. My niece was killed in the impact. Isabella lived, but only barely. The diagnosis was straightforward: serious damage to her left kidney, several internal hemorrhages, and contusions. She would require immediate surgery, most likely a transplant. The physicians advised us that time was of the essence and that we should be prepared for the worst. We spent days in the ICU. I never left her side, sleeping on a chair and refusing to eat. I simply stared at the machines that kept her alive. My husband became a statue. He didn't speak or cry. He was simply there. One night Isabella opened her eyes. She was weak. She couldn't speak clearly, but she recognized me. She gave me a small grin and asked, "Mom, do you think there is a heaven?" My throat tightened. "Yes, my love, of course there is." "And do you think bad people can go there if they're sorry?" "Why do you ask that, sweetheart?" She took a break. Her gaze grew far away. "Because I did something very bad. Something exceedingly awful." I felt my stomach drop. "A few months ago I lied to you. I lied about Adrian." I didn't speak. "What? What did you lie about?" "I made it up, Mom. The part about him touching me. It wasn't true. I was just angry because he wouldn't let me use his tablet. I wanted to punish him. I thought if I said something I don't know. I didn't think all of that would happen. Then I became afraid and didn't know how to convey the truth." Her eyes flooded with tears. Mine had already overflowed. "I killed my brother," she replied, sobbing. "And now I'm going to die too." I clutched her, as if I might draw her soul into mine. "Don't say that. You're not going to die. Forgive you. I'm right here with you." But inside, a fracture was tearing me apart. Not for her, but for him. Adrian. For his expression on the floor and his quiet. That night I returned home. I dragged myself like a dying beast. I told my hubby everything. He was calm. He didn't say anything for several minutes. Finally, without looking at me, he murmured, "We're not going to judge her. What's done is done," and walked away. His apathy hurt me more than his fist that night, but I couldn't take the stillness any longer. In the early hours of the morning, I looked for Adrian. His phone number was disconnected. I found him after searching social media platforms. A profile image without a face indicates a semi-abandoned account. I emailed him, "Hi, it's me. Please just read this." He did not respond. I waited 1 day. 2. On the 3rd day, I sent an additional message. Long and painful. I informed him about the accident, Isabella, and the confession. I told him I wasn't expecting him to forgive me. I just wanted him to know Mom wanted to see him, that she didn't have much time, and that we weren't asking for anything else. Hours later, a response. "You all hurt me too much. I don't know if I can forgive, but if she's as bad as you say, I'll go one last time." My hands trembled as I texted him the hospital location. I heard nothing else for 3 days. I was in the hallway when I noticed him. Adrian is leaner, has dark circles under his eyes, and wears basic clothing. He walked as if he were carrying the weight of the world upon his shoulders. My heart desired to run to him. My body did not move. I watched him enter the room. She spotted him. He stared at her, and time stood still. Isabella burst out in tears. "I'm sorry. Please, I ruined you." Adrian listened quietly. "I can't forgive you completely," he finally replied, "but a part of me already has. He grasped her hand, spoke to her for a few minutes, and then went. He did not greet or glance at me. He only left one sentence before going away. If there's a funeral, I'll be there. But don't expect anything else. He didn't say anything else after that. Do not anticipate anything else. Adrian vanished again. No message, no reaction, only the echo of his voice in that room, in Isabella's cries, repeating her apology again and over, as if asking for forgiveness was sufficient. But I couldn't sleep now that I knew. I knew time was running out, and the only person who could save my daughter was the same one I had assisted in destroying. A week after his visit, the doctor confirmed it. She's going to need a transplant soon. My spouse and I had compatibility tests. We weren't compatible, neither of us. The risk of rejection was exceedingly high. The doctor was direct. A biological brother is the best option. If he's a match, the chances are much higher. I'd already known. I'd seen it in the medical records. They have the same blood type. O positive. Even though I knew I had no right, I looked for him again. I wrote to him from a number he didn't recognize. I just said, "It's important. Please, we need to talk." To my amazement, he consented. We met in a small remote coffee shop. He was on time. He strolled in alone without looking at anyone. He was wearing the same modest clothes and carrying a rucksack on his shoulder. However, his eyes were different. They were no longer the eyes of a hurt youngster, but of someone who had learnt to accept the emptiness. He sat across from us. My hubby was beside me. Nobody talked for several seconds. He interrupted the stillness. "What do you want?" I gulped hard. My voice quivered. "Adrian, we checked the test. There's a high chance you're a match for Isabella. The doctor says if you get tested, you could save her." He wasn't responding. He expressed no rage or astonishment, only fatigue. "You're asking me to donate to my sister?" "Yes, I told you." My husband intervened. "We know this doesn't erase the past, but it could be the first step to fixing things. To becoming a family again?" Adrian raised his eyebrows. He then gazed at us with surgical coldness. "Becoming a family again?" I asked, choking back tears. "We're not asking you to forgive us, just to help her. She's dying." Then he smiled. However, it was not a cheerful smile. It was a sad, sardonic, and perplexing smirk. "And you think this fixes everything?" My spouse asked, winking. "It's not for us. It's for her." Her? The same one who said I touched her? The one who watched me sleep on the street and didn't lift a finger? The one who only said she was sorry when she realized she might die? I tried to interrupt. "Adrian, please. Do you know how many times I thought about dying?" he asked. "How many nights I slept clutching my backpack? How many times I didn't eat for 2 days because I didn't have a single coin?" He looked at us but didn't notice us. He was speaking to his recollections. "I was about to throw myself off a bridge, not once but 3 times. And you know why I didn't? Because I told myself, if I survive this, then I'm going to live my way without owing anything to anyone." He took his place. "And now you come to ask me to cut myself in two, to give a part of myself to save you." My husband stood up as well, this time with his fists tightened. "Your sister is dying." "Doesn't that mean anything to you?" Adrian asked, his expression mixed with wrath and pity. "You know what it means to me? That now it turns out I'm worth something. That now you need me. That now you want to listen to me." I was shaking with joy. "Just think about it, please. If not for her, then for yourself. So you can get closure on this." He was grumbling. "I've already got closure. I received it the night I slept on the street with a bloodied face while you celebrated Christmas without me." He then left. He did not shout, cry, or disrespect us. He just departed. That was the last time I saw him. I did not sleep that night. My husband paced the living room like a caged lion, muttering words like, ungrateful, selfish. What kind of brother does that? I heard him, but I didn't disagree because one phrase kept replaying in my head. She is dying, and he can save her. I felt useless, empty, and increasingly desperate. So I did the unthinkable. I opened Facebook. I shared a photo of Isabella in the hospital. Tubes, dark circles, her little face sleepy, delicate on the verge of death. I wrote a lengthy, honest, yet twisted text. I informed them that we needed a donor, that her brother was a match, that we had already apologized, that the girl had sought forgiveness, and that he was the only thing missing. I tagged him, using his full name, and concluded with a condemnatory sentence. What kind of monster refuses to save his sister when he has the power to do so? First there was silence. Then the post blew up. Dozens of reactions, hundreds of comments, initially from acquaintances, then relatives, and finally from complete strangers. Everyone held an opinion. Everyone pointed fingers. Everyone judged. Seriously, he's going to let a little girl die? A kidney, it's one kidney, you can live with one. After everything she suffered, it's the least he could do. What kind of human trash? A life for a life. It makes up for the damage. Some people went even further. A monster disguised as a victim. Anyone with a heart would donate without thinking. Maybe he did what the girl said, and that's why he doesn't want to help. That one hurt more than I expected because, despite knowing Adrian was innocent, I had made him the target again. I had unleashed a digital mob, but in my mind, I kept thinking the same thing. If he feels forced, he might say yes. Several hours passed. I reloaded the post every 5 minutes, waited, and checked his profile. Nothing. Until about 4 hours later he responded. Instead of a remark or a private message, send a video. He shared a roughly 5-minute video on his profile, and it received hundreds of reactions in less than an hour. It began with him sitting on a bench, an empty park in the background, plain clothes, untidy hair, and deep dark circles, yet with an expression I couldn't recognize. He started. Hello, my name is Adrian. Many of you know me because of what my mother posted today. Some of you knew me before, others only from what you've read. I want to tell you something I never had the chance to say. He paused. Took a long breath. 2 years ago, my sister accused me of touching her in front of my entire family, and without asking me or listening to me, they beat me, threw me out, and took everything from me. I was 18 years old at the time, and my world collapsed. I slept on the street, went hungry, lost my scholarship, had no one to call, slept in libraries, hid in public restrooms to wash myself, and considered suicide several times. He then presented a recording from his phone. It was a talk with Isabella in the hospital. Her crying, confessing, pleading for his pardon, claiming she made it all up, that she had wrecked him, and that she did not deserve his forgiveness. Then he looked back at the camera. I saved this recording not for revenge, but because I knew that one day someone would try to turn me into the villain again. He took a break. His voice cracked. I do not wish for my sister to die, ever. But I will not save the people who killed me while I was still alive. I will not give them a piece of my body as a currency for their redemption. I am not their second chance. He ended with a heartbreaking sentence. I am not a monster, I just learned to say no, and this time, I am the one breaking the silence. He stopped the video, and I stood there stunned, my phone in my hand. The notifications began coming in. But now the comments were intended for us. What kind of mother allows that? You are the real monsters. She lies. You attack. And he's supposed to save you? Disgusting. I hope you live with that guilt for the rest of your lives. The private messages were terrible. My sister has blocked me. My folks called me and cried. My sister-in-law wrote to say she hoped the same thing happened to me. Isabella saw the video. She saw everything. I discovered her crying alone in her bed. Everyone hates me, she said. Everyone, even him. I didn't know how to respond. I just hugged her, but I'm not sure if it was out of love or remorse. The video has gone viral. In less than 24 hours, Adrian's post was shared on Facebook groups, Reddit, TikTok accounts that collected family confessions, and even Twitter threads arguing whether he should give the kidney. It wasn't only our narrative anymore, now everyone had an opinion. The majority supported him. Some argue that forgiveness does not force you to sacrifice yourself. Others replied, a kidney doesn't pay for a ruined life. And many simply said what I couldn't ignore, they deserve it. Isabella, who had before been just another victim in a hospital, was now viewed as a manipulator and liar. The phrase false accuser began emerging in the comments. One that cut me like a dagger was, let her die, just as she almost killed her brother. I had to erase the message. But it was too late. The damage had been done. But Adrian was not finished. A day after the first video, he posted another. This time, he wasn't speaking in the park, he was sitting at a table, holding a piece of paper in his hand. I've received a lot of questions, and the most common one is, why can't you just forgive? I'm going to try to explain it without anesthesia. His voice was calm, tired, and precise. I was accused of child abuse. There was no trial or proof, just a phrase shouted aloud, and that was enough. I lost my house, my schooling, and my name. I became a pariah, and no one wanted to be near me. Have you ever attempted to rent a room with the rumor that you abuse someone? Have you ever tried to find work with a stain you can't erase, even if it's a lie? He held up a document. His medical records from a year ago show that he was treated for suicidal ideation, severe depression, and starvation. The first time I slept under a bridge, it was raining. The second night, I thought about swallowing all the pills I had. The third, someone spat on me in the street. He yelled, "Child abuser," at me, and I had no one to call. He put the document on the table. I don't need you to understand me. I just need you to listen. I don't want revenge. I do not wish for my sister's death. But I will not offer myself up as a martyr for a family that buried me alive. He picked up a photograph. It was of him and Isabella when she was a small child. They were smiling. His hand was shaky. I loved her. She was my sister. I made her breakfast, changed her clothes, waited for her after school. And when she said what she said, she didn't just destroy my life. She destroyed me. He tore the photograph in half. He remained silent for a few seconds. My kidney is not a currency of redemption. I am not the cure for anyone's guilt. I will not donate, and I will not apologize for it. He ended the video with a line that felt like a bullet. If you look for me at the funeral, I'll be in the back. Not to comfort, but to watch what you built and left to die. He put the camera away. I vomited after seeing it. That is not a metaphor. I practically vomited in the hospital bathroom, from terror, remorse, and the fact that I could no longer hide. When I returned to the room, Isabella was awake. Her eyes were inflamed. She didn't say anything, only said, "Does he hate me?" I didn't know what to reply because I had no idea how he felt, only what I had done and what was coming. The doctors informed us that her condition was deteriorating, that the days were numbered, that there was no longer time to wait for regular donors, and that Adrian remained the most compatible candidate. But he had already mentioned that there would be no donations. That night, my spouse burst. "Damn selfish, ungrateful bastard. Let him rot wherever he is." I tried to calm him down, telling him that cursing would not help. "And what do you expect me to do? Applaud him for letting his sister die?" He isolated himself in the kitchen and smashed a dish. I sat alone. In solitude, I grieved as I glanced at images on my phone of them as children, when they were innocent. I cried like I never had before because I knew Isabella was going to die. And it wasn't due to a shortage of kidneys, it was for something far worse, a family's refusal to listen, believe, and love unreservedly. The room smelt like disinfectant and sadness. Isabella was unconscious and linked to more machinery than her body. Her skin was nearly translucent. Every time the alarm went off, I held my breath. The doctor would come in, check, change something and depart with the same expression. Containment, not solution, only waiting. The donation list was not moving, the compatibilities were minor. The chances are nearly negligible, and Adrian was gone. After his second video, he vanished entirely, deleting his social media accounts, changing his phone number, leaving no trace. Nobody knew where he was. And to be honest, I wasn't sure I wanted him found. Not for his sake, but because I was concerned about what my husband would do if he ever saw him again. The days passed like sluggish blades. The hateful messages were no longer visible. They were now private. Some wrote to wish me strength. Others would tell me I deserved every moment of pain. A woman I didn't know sent me a message. "Proud of yourself now. You raised a daughter who lied and a son you destroyed." I hung up the phone. I did not switch it on again. One morning in the early hours, the doctor summoned us. The sentence was direct. "Prepare yourselves. She's no longer responding. It's just a matter of waiting for the moment." I walked out into the hallway. I slid from the wall to the floor. I did not cry. I just hugged my knees. My hubby didn't say anything. He was pale and shocked. He was not the same person who had beaten his son that night. He was a broken statue, waiting to be crushed totally. I returned to the room. I grasped Isabella's hand and whispered, "I'm here, my love. Mommy's here." There was no response. Just a continuous beep from the cardiac monitor. I closed my eyes and prayed for the first time. Not to a god, not for a miracle. I asked for time, just a little more, just a bit more. And day later, we got a letter with no return address. There is no name, only a sheet of paper folded in three. It came from Adrian. "Don't search for me. I'm not going to change my mind. I don't want her to die, but I won't take part in a forced redemption play. Isabella lied, and you believed her. I was sentenced without a trial, and all I wanted for was to be heard. which no one granted. So don't ask me to give you my body now. You've already taken my soul. They believe death redeems, but I died 2 years ago. Her end is not my fault. It is an echo of her origin. I hope you find peace, but don't search for it in me. There was no signature. Only a photo of him smiling from years ago, when he still considered us family. Isabella died a week later. There were no screams or warnings, just a flat tone and a straight line across the screen. My husband collapsed. I did not yell. I did not cry. I just held her until they removed her out of my arms. The funeral was modest and frigid. The majority of the family had withdrawn themselves, some out of shame and others out of hatred. Nobody knew what to say to us. And Adrian, he did come. He arrived in quiet, sat in the rear, did not cry, look at us, or approach the casket. Finally he rose up, left a single flower, and walked away silently. Today, I'm writing from a silent house. My husband no longer speaks. He spends his days watching television with the volume turned off. I stroll through the empty rooms with my daughter's clothes still folded on her bed. Every now and then, I look back at her last photo, when she was still breathing and had a chance. And I think of Adrian, of his words, his broken stare, of what we did and did not do. And I remind myself, death does not come alone, it carries remorse and memories with it. And neither can be buried. One suggestion. I read your whole story. I sat in silence and could only think. What an insane mother. You literally killed him in life and then you expect him to save you. After you took everything from him, now you're asking for an organ. If I were him, I wouldn't have given it to you either. In fact, I'd be in the line of people spitting in your face. I hope his gaze haunts you until your last day. 2 further comments. You left him without a home, without food, without emotional support, without a future, and you wanted him to risk his health for you. How can you even ask why he didn't want to donate? The answer is obvious and painful, because you killed him first. A third comment. Your story is the closest thing I've read to a slow-motion murder. Adrian died when you threw him out on the street like trash, and now you're crying because he wouldn't save the one who lied. Did it not occur to you that every time he saw his sister, he was reliving the trauma? The nerve? The ego? The total lack of humanity? A fourth comment follows. The way you minimize everything you did is terrifying. My husband hit him. It sounds like you're saying he spilled his coffee. Your son was physically assaulted, thrown out, abandoned, and vilified by everyone. And you recount it as if it were an uncomfortable anecdote. What kind of emotional psychopath are you? The fifth comment is, you know what the worst part of all this was? That your daughter confessed she lied and you still decided to use her tragedy to manipulate your son again. You learned nothing. You just changed tactics. First it was guilt, then fear, then public blackmail. You are the nightmare of any human being with a mother. The sixth comment. I refuse to feel sorry for you. You made your son's life impossible. Then you tried to paint him as a monster for not donating a damn kidney. You used him like a piece of meat, and when he said no, you tried to manipulate the entire internet. How shameful. What moral depravity. I hope you never find peace. The seventh comment. Adrian is a hero for still being alive after what you did to him. He was the one who deserved help. He was the one who needed urgent therapy. But you were too busy protecting your parental egos to see that you were destroying him. And even today, you continue to blame him. Monstrous. The eighth comment. What did you expect? That he would give you the kidney and then you'd all pose for a reconciled family photo? This isn't a fairy tale. This is real life. And in real life, the people you destroyed don't come back when it's convenient for you. They don't forgive you automatically. They don't save you just because you're bleeding crocodile tears. Comment 9 is as follows. You used his pain as a public weapon. You exposed him with his full name. You humiliated him after having already thrown him onto the street. And you wonder why he blocked you? The question should be, how did he not sue you? Because he had more than enough reason. It's a miracle you're not in jail. And it's a miracle he's sane. A 10th comment. Isabella didn't die from lack of a kidney. She died from a lie and from parents who didn't know how to handle it. The blame isn't Adrian's, it's yours. You killed her with silence, with denial, with manipulation. And now you want to lay the corpse at his feet? I don't buy it. I'm not swallowing that. Parents secretly used $15,500. On my credit card for my sister's Europe trip, I reported them, hired a lawyer, and turned their scheme upside down. I am Lucas, a 28-year-old man, and my younger sister Lily, a 22-year-old female, recently graduated from college. Our parents have always had an odd approach to parenting, but this newest act has made me enraged. To provide some context, I've always been the responsible member of the family. I worked hard in school, received scholarships, and found a nice career in finance right out of college. I've been financially independent since I was 22, and I'm pleased of my accomplishments. Lily, on the other hand, has always been the baby in the family. Don't get me wrong, I adore my sister, but she's clearly been coddled by our parents. Growing up, it was obvious that Lily was the favorite. She was given the latest clothes and gadgets and was never forced to work part-time or help with home duties. I tried not to let it affect me too much, focused instead on my own aspirations and future, but occasionally the partiality was difficult to ignore. I recall one specific instance when I was 16 and Lily was 10. I'd been saving for months to buy a new gaming console. When I finally had enough money, I joyfully informed my parents that I was going to the store to buy it. To my surprise, they answered, "Oh, we already bought one for Lily last week. You can share hers." I was upset, but I swallowed my disappointment and tried to be pleased for my sister. Let's fast forward to the present. Lily recently finished with a communications degree. I am truly proud of her. She worked hard and earned the right to celebrate her accomplishment. I also sent her a wonderful graduation gift. A new laptop she had been wanting. My mom called me last week. She was overjoyed, telling me how they had prepared the ideal graduation gift for Lily, a month-long vacation of Europe. I was overjoyed for Lily, believing it was a lovely gift from our parents, but then the bombshell dropped. "We used your credit card to book it all," my mother explained nonchalantly, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "We'll pay you back, of course, but we needed the points from your card to upgrade some of the flights and hotels." I was speechless. I couldn't believe what I heard. When I finally recovered my voice, I inquired about the amount they had spent. The response made me feel as if I had been punched in the gut. $15,500. $15,500 was charged to my credit card without my knowledge or consent. "Mom," I began, trying to keep my voice steady. "You can't just use my credit card without asking me. That's illegal, and $15,500 is a lot of money." She dismissed my concerns. "Oh, don't be so dramatic, Lucas. It's for your sister's graduation. We're family, and family helps each other out. Besides, we're good for it. We'll pay you back eventually." Eventually? What exactly did that mean? And since when has $15,500 been considered casual? I tried to explain to my mother why this was such a significant deal, the effect on my credit score, the possibility that I may need the credit limit for an emergency, and the sheer breach of trust. But she didn't hear it. "You've always been so selfish," she replied, her voice becoming cold. "Can't you just be happy for your sister? This is her big moment, and you're trying to ruin it with your penny-pinching ways." I couldn't believe what I heard. I was considered selfish for being concerned about a $15,500 unauthorized charge on my credit card. I hung off the phone feeling angry, wounded, and incredulous. Over the next few days I tried to talk to my father, hoping he'd be more reasonable, but he agreed with my mother, telling me I was overreacting and that I should be more supportive of my sister. Lily, for her part, appeared clueless to the entire event. When I tried to talk to her about it, she just gushed about how happy she was for the trip and thanked me for helping with her graduation gift. I felt crazy. Was I truly the unreasonable one here? I decided to phone the credit card company to dispute the charges, but to my astonishment, I learned that my parents had used my card information, which they kept in case of an emergency, to book everything online. The credit card company stated that because I had provided them my information, it was not deemed fraud. Now I'm faced with a $15,500 bill, a maxed-out credit card, and a family who thinks I'm greedy for refusing to pay my sister's lavish vacation. I am hurt, furious, and feel betrayed by those who are supposed to love and support me. I do not know what to do. Part of me wants to cancel the entire vacation, but I know it would cause a major schism in our family. Another part of me wants to just pay it off to avoid the fuss, but $15,500 is a large sum of money, and the principle of the situation bothers me. Plus, I'm concerned that if I let this go, it may set a precedent for future financial exploitation. Am I overreacting? Should I just suck it up and pay for my sister's vacation, or should I remain firm, even if it means risking my connection with my family? I'm feeling lost and could use some advice. Update 1. I appreciate everyone's encouraging remarks and advice. I was stunned by the huge response to my post. Reading through your comments helped me realize that I wasn't insane for feeling violated and outraged over this scenario. I took your counsel and decided to take action. First, I called my credit card company again to escalate the situation. I described the scenario in detail, emphasizing that, while my parents had my card information for emergencies, I had never allowed this exact use. After some back and forth, they decided to look into the charges as possible fraud. Next, I sent a group text to my parents and Lily, requesting a Zoom call to discuss the problem. I wanted to give them the opportunity to set things right before taking more serious actions. The call was intense. I began by calmly describing why their actions were unacceptable. The legal consequences, the violation of trust, and the financial strain it placed on me. I informed them that I had reported the transactions as fraudulent and that they needed to cancel the trip immediately. My parents' reaction did not meet my expectations. They were furious, accusing me of being dramatic and attempting to derail Lily's graduation party. My mom went so far as to say, "We raised you, clothed you, and put a roof over your head. The least you could do is help give your sister the trip of a lifetime." I took a deep breath before responding. "You chose to have children. Providing for us was your responsibility as parents. It doesn't mean you get to commit credit card fraud in my name." And Lily, who had remained calm until now, burst into sobs. "I can't believe you're trying to ruin my graduation gift," she said. "You've always been jealous of me. Why can't you be happy for me for once?" Her comments hurt, but they also bolstered my determination. I saw that this pattern of entitlement and favoritism was pervasive, and it was necessary to establish some clear boundaries. "Lily," I began, trying to keep my voice calm but firm. "I'm happy for you. I'm proud of your graduation. But this trip was booked illegally using my money without my permission. It's not a gift from me, and it's not okay." My father, who had been unusually silent, eventually spoke up. "Son, we didn't think it was such a big deal. We've always had access to your card for emergencies. We just thought, as family, it would be okay this one time." I couldn't believe what I heard. "Dad, $15,500 is not a small amount, and this was not an emergency. You can't just decide to spend my money without asking me." The call concluded with my parents outraged, Lily in tears, and me exhausted yet determined. They declined to cancel the trip, claiming that I was overreacting and that they would reimburse me. Soon after the call, I took the next move. I contacted a lawyer buddy of mine and discussed the circumstances. He informed me that what my parents did was illegal, and that if I chose to take legal action, I would have valid reasons. I also went to the police station and reported the unauthorized usage of my credit card. The officer I dealt with was compassionate and took down all the information. He advised me that pressing charges would most certainly cause a significant schism in my family, but he also informed me that I was perfectly within my rights to do so. I'm still torn about what to do next. On the one hand, I adore my family, and the thought of pursuing legal action against them makes me sick. On the other hand, their behavior is inappropriate, and I'm concerned that if I don't take a firm stance now, this will happen again in the future. For the time being, I've opted to await the results of the credit card company's investigation. I have also frozen my credit to prevent further fraudulent usage of my information. This entire experience has made me understand that I need to set tighter boundaries with my family. I've always tried to be the peacekeeper, to smooth things over and make everyone happy, but in doing so, I've let myself be taken advantage of numerous times. I am hurt and outraged, but I also feel a strange sense of empowerment. For the first time, I'm standing up for myself and saying, "No. This is not okay." It's unsettling and frightening, but it also feels important. Thank you all again for your encouragement and wisdom. I'll update again if I receive more information about the credit card investigation, or if anything else happens with my family. Update 2. It's been several weeks since my last update, and a lot has happened. I'd like to thank everyone again for their help and advice. Your remarks have given me strength at this tough time. First, good news. The credit card company's probe ended in my favor. They agreed that the accusations were improper and reversed them. It's a big relief to have the $15,500 burden removed off my shoulders. Now for the familial fallout. When my parents and Lily discovered that the vacation had been canceled owing to a credit card chargeback, all hell broke loose. My phone was full of angry calls and texts. My mother left a particularly harsh voicemail, calling me a greedy, ungrateful son who had ruined Lily's life. Lily resorted to social media, sharing an emotional video describing how her spiteful brother had ruined her ideal graduation trip. Some of our shared acquaintances and extended family members began to contact me, asking why I was treating my younger sister so badly. The situation was spiraling out of control, and I realized I needed to correct the record. I made a calm, factual post detailing what had actually happened, how my card had been used without my consent, and how I had attempted to handle the situation with my family before contacting the credit card company. The response to my post was varied. Some others were supportive, expressing surprise at my parents' behavior. Others still believed I should have just taken one for the team and let Lily have her trip. It was surprising to learn how many people believed it was acceptable to conduct fraud as long as it was for family. A few days after my post, I got a surprise call from my aunt, my mother's sister. She was empathetic to my predicament and told me about some family history that I didn't know. Apparently, my mother had a history of financial carelessness and had previously taken advantage of family members. My aunt encouraged me to hold firm and offered her support. This chat with my aunt made me realize that the problem was deeper than simply this one episode. It was a pattern of behavior that had been tolerated and justified for years. I understood then that I needed to set clear boundaries, not just for myself, but also to halt the pattern of financial abuse. I decided to take a major step. I informed my parents that I would be in no communication with them for the foreseeable future. I mentioned that I needed time to comprehend what had transpired and could not trust them just now. I also informed Lily that, while I loved her and was pleased of her accomplishments, I wanted some space from her as well. Their reactions were unsurprisingly negative. My parents accused me of pulling the family apart. Lily screamed, accusing me of punishing her for something she didn't do. It was difficult, but I stood by my decision. In the midst of all this familial dysfunction, I've been working on safeguarding myself against future financial exploitation. I changed all of my passwords, closed the credit card that my parents had access to, and opened a new one with a different bank. I've also started seeing a therapist to work through my emotions about the situation and establish healthier limits. One unexpected positive result of this journey has been a closer relationship with my aunt and a couple of cousins who have reached out to provide assistance. It's comforting to know that not everyone in my family feels what my parents did was acceptable. Regarding Lily's graduation vacation, I heard through the family grapevine that my parents are still considering about sending her somewhere. Part of me feels sorry for her losing out on the Europe trip, but I keep reminding myself that it was not my obligation to provide it for her. I am still dealing with thoughts of guilt and mistrust. There are times when I question if I did the right thing, or if I was too harsh. But then I recall how violated I felt when I learned what they had done, and I know I made the correct decision by sticking up for myself. This incident was a tough wake-up call, but it also taught me valuable lessons about self-respect and setting limits. I'm learning that it's all right to say no, even to family, and that love should not have a price. Thank you again for your support. I'll keep you updated if there are any important developments, but for the time being, I'm focusing on healing and moving forward. Post 3. It's been approximately 2 months since my last post, and I'd want to share some developments with you all. Your ongoing support and advice have been vital during this difficult time. First, I'll address the most important issue, the legal status. After careful study and consulting with my lawyer, I decided not to file charges against my parents. This was not an easy decision, and I know many of you advised me to pursue legal action. However, my lawyer said that because the credit card company had reversed the charges, prosecuting a criminal case would be hard and potentially costly, with no assurance of success. Instead, we wrote my parents a formal cease and desist letter, informing them that any future attempts to use my financial information would result in instant legal action. Now for the family situation. My no-contact period with my parents and Lily has been both difficult and educational. It's given me time to ponder on our family relationships and improve myself. I've been going to therapy on a regular basis, which has been quite beneficial in helping me process my feelings and set healthier limits. About a month into the no-contact period, I got an unexpected email from Lily. Compared to her prior crying claims, this email was rather sophisticated. She wrote that she had thought a lot about our parents' actions and realized how wrong they were. She apologized for her first reaction and for not advocating for me. Lily said that she had always known about the favoritism but had been too afraid and comfortable to question it. I was cautiously optimistic about Lily's email but decided to take it slowly. We've had a few phone talks since then, and I can tell she truly wants to understand my point of view. She revealed some of her own experiences with our parents' financial irresponsibility, which she had previously kept to herself. The aborted trip to Europe appears to have served as a wake-up call for her as well. My parents have been less inclined to accept responsibility. They've made multiple attempts to reach me, including angry voicemails and guilt-tripping emails. My mother even showed up at my place unexpectedly one day, causing quite a ruckus in the hallway. I held firm and refused to engage, which was difficult but important. The situation with extended family members has been mixed. Some family have been helpful, particularly my aunt, who first contacted out. She has become an important ally and source of support. Others, however, continue to encourage me to reconcile with my parents, citing the "but their family" argument. I've had to distance myself from some of these family for my own mental health. On a good side, this predicament has resulted in some unanticipated personal development. With the time and energy I used to devote to dealing with my family's problems, I've been able to concentrate more on my own life and ambitions. I've started a new passion, photography, and I'm spending more time with pals that respect my boundaries. I've also made important financial decisions. I've upped my payments to retirement accounts and begun to construct a more substantial emergency fund. This entire experience has truly emphasized the significance of financial independence and stability. Last week, I had an especially satisfying moment. I was promoted at work, which came with a big wage increase. Previously, I might have felt forced to share this news and the financial rewards with my family. This time, I celebrated quietly with a few close friends, pleased of my successes but free of shame or obligation to share. Regarding Lily's graduation vacation, my aunt informed me that our parents decided to send her on a 2-week tour of California. Lily seemed to appreciate it. Looking ahead, I am cautiously optimistic. I've chosen to extend my no-contact period with my parents for at least 3 more months. I need more time to recuperate and to determine whether they are capable of respecting my boundaries. I'm willing to gradually re-establish our relationship with Lily, but I'm treading carefully and setting firm boundaries. This event taught me a lot about setting boundaries, advocating for myself, and understanding the actual meaning of family. I've understood that family is more than just blood links. It's about mutual respect, support, and love. The friends and relatives who have supported me during this ordeal have taught me what true family is like. I also learned an important lesson about financial freedom. I've always been good with money, but this situation has made me even more attentive. I've increased security measures on all of my accounts and grown more forceful about protecting my financial information, even from family members. There have been moments of doubt and sadness, particularly when I have missed family gatherings due to the no-contact policy. Mother's Day was very painful, but I remind myself that this separation is essential for my mental health and personal development. One unanticipated result of this scenario is that I've become a resource for friends who are coping with financial problems in their own families. Several people have contacted me for guidance on setting boundaries and dealing with financially irresponsible family members. It is great to be able to assist others in similar situations. My aunt informed me that my parents are experiencing financial difficulties. Apparently, they had planned to use my credit for more than simply Lily's vacation. This has resulted in some arguments between them, with my father blaming my mother for going too far with the credit card fraud. Part of me feels awful knowing they're struggling financially, but I remind myself that it's not my obligation to correct their poor financial decisions. Lily has provided some insight into our parents' reactions to all of this. She claims they're still not sure why I responded so strongly. They regard their acts as a natural part of being a family and don't understand why I'm making such a big deal about it. This lack of understanding is frustrating, but it also confirms that I made the proper decision to distance myself. I've been reflecting a lot about my upbringing and early adulthood, noticing patterns of financial and emotional exploitation that I had internalized. It's been both heartbreaking and liberating. I'm learning to validate my own emotions and experiences without needing permission from my parents. In my personal life, I've begun dating again. I was scared to become involved with anyone while dealing with so much family dysfunction, but I recently met someone who has been quite sympathetic of my position. It's early days, but it feels fantastic to be connecting with someone that respects my boundaries and principles. I'm also considering making some major life adjustments. I've always wanted to get a master's degree, but I put it off because I was concerned about how it would affect my capacity to support my family financially. Now I'm actively researching programs and contemplating taking the plunge. It is empowered to make decisions based simply on what is best for me and my future. As I write this report, I am impressed by how much has changed in only a few months. The initial shock and indignation have subsided, replaced by a sense of quiet determination. I am no longer simply responding to my family's activities. I'm actively building the life I desire for myself. To those of you who are coping with similar family troubles, I want to express that it will get better. Setting boundaries is difficult, and there may be reaction. But stay strong. You have the right to safeguard yourself, your wealth, and your mental health. Thank you all for your continued support throughout this adventure. Your counsel and encouragement have been lifelines. I am not sure what the future holds for my relationship with my parents and sister, but I am confident that whatever happens, I will be fine. I'm stronger, more confident in myself, and prepared to face whatever comes next. I will provide an update if there are any important developments, but for the time being, I am focused on moving forward and creating the life I want, surrounded by people who respect and support me. Here's to new beginnings and hard-gained wisdom. Update 4. It's been 6 months since my previous update, and I felt it was time to share the most recent developments with everyone who has been so supportive along this trip. First, the major news. I've been accepted to a master's program at a city around 3 hours from where I now live. It's a 2-year financial technology curriculum that precisely coincides with my professional ambitions. I start this fall, and I'm both eager and scared about this new chapter in my life. The decision to seek this degree was not simple. It entails leaving my work, relocating to a new city, and taking out some student debts. However, it also entails investing in myself and my future in ways I've always wanted to. I realized I had been holding myself back by constantly considering how my decisions would affect my family. Now I'm making decisions based on what's best for me, which feels extremely liberated. My family situation has taken unexpected turns. My no-contact period with my parents officially ended 2 months ago. I consented to participate in a family therapy session led by a professional therapist. It was intense. My parents responded defensively, arguing that they had done nothing wrong. However, as the discussion went, several shocking truths emerged. It turned out that my father had lost a considerable amount of money in a disastrous venture, which he had kept from everyone, including my mother. They'd been discreetly struggling financially for months and saw my credit card as a method to keep up appearances. This discovery caused a lot of tears and recriminations. My mother felt betrayed by my father's secrecy. My father felt ashamed of his terrible financial judgments. And both of them seemed to realize the significance of what they had done to me. While this explanation does not justify their actions, it does help me understand the desperation that drove their awful decisions. The therapist assisted us in working through some of these difficulties, and for the first time, I received genuine apologies from both of my parents. We agreed to continue family therapy sessions on a monthly basis. It's a lengthy process, and I'm still setting tough boundaries, but I'm cautiously optimistic about repairing our connection on better terms. Lily has continued to develop and mature. She has taken steps to achieve financial independence, such as taking a full-time job and moving into her own apartment. We've started communicating more frequently, and I feel like I'm getting to know my sister as an adult for the first time. She's even asked for budgeting and saving tips, which feels like a big step forward in our relationship. On a personal level, the relationship I highlighted in my previous report has developed into something wonderful. Ingrid has been really supportive of my desire to return to school, despite the fact that it will need us to travel large distances for some time. Her personal experiences with creating boundaries with family have made her an invaluable source of support and understanding. Financially, I'm doing well. The promotion I obtained enabled me to save a large amount of money for my transfer and to help offset some of the expenditures of graduate studies. I've also gotten much more forceful in protecting my financial information. I recently had to turn down an attempt by a distant relative to persuade me to co-sign a loan. It was not easy, but I held firm, and it felt good to establish my boundaries. As I prepare for this new chapter in my life, I've been thinking about how much has changed since that first shocking phone call from my mother about the credit card charges. The pain and rage I felt back then have mostly vanished, giving way to a sense of empowerment and self-assurance I had no idea I had. I've learned a lot from this experience. I've learned the value of establishing and keeping boundaries, especially with family. I've realized that it's acceptable to prioritize my own well-being and future, and I've learned that true family, whether blood or choice, encourages growth and respects personal limits. Thank you to everyone who has followed my story and contributed support and advice along the way. During some of the most trying times, your words have provided me with strength and insight. Those going through comparable family issues should know that they can come out stronger and wiser. As I pack my flat and prepare for this new journey, I experience a surge of excitement and possibilities that I haven't felt in years. I am proud of how far I have come, and I am excited about what the future holds. I may not be able to update for a long due to my upcoming move and start of school, but I will always be grateful for the support I've received here.